if President Trump does indeed return to the White House in just a few weeks. And elsewhere, the Home Secretary has announced that police firearms officers facing prosecution will be entitled to anonymity up to the point of conviction. It comes after Met Firearms cop Martin Blake was yesterday acquitted of murdering Chris Cabba. We'll have all the latest. And in a GB News exclusive, civil servants blocked a Rwanda-style deportation deal with Uganda because they were concerned over the country's record on LGBT rights. Charlie Peters joins me with all the details shortly. That's all coming in your next hour. Thanks for your company this afternoon. A big 3 hours coming up. Sadly, there's been more death in the English Channel this morning. That's after a migrant boat sank off the coast of Calais. 3 people died and up to 45 people were rescued. Mark White will join me very shortly with the latest on that. Meanwhile, send your views and comments on today's show and all the news stories we're covering. gbnews.com/your say. I'll be keeping a keen eye over all your views in just a tick. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Birmingham Airport has been evacuated and all flights suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle. In a post on social media, the airport said police are currently on site dealing with an incident. Airport operations are currently suspended. A spokesman for West Midlands Police said passengers are advised not to come to the airport at this time. An investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage, where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. In other news, turning to the House of Commons, where Angela Rayner's been filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions. The Deputy Prime Minister came under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs after the deadly sinking of a migrant boat in the English Channel this morning. In response, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Meanwhile, the third body has now been recovered from the English Channel after a migrant boat sank, according to the French Coast Guard. A passing ferry recovered the third victim after a body was spotted floating in the water. A fourth migrant was taken to hospital for treatment after being pulled from the water earlier this morning. Around 50 people were on board when the vessel went down, leaving many stranded in the water. Labour peer Lord Ali is facing fresh criticism after reports revealed 4 minor breaches in the registration of his interests. The House of Lords Commissioner for Standards found that he failed to register himself as an unremunerated director of Foundation and neglected to maintain accurate records for a company he controlled. However, the Commissioner deemed them minor, requiring only a letter of apology, which Lord Ali has provided. In his letter, he acknowledged the breaches and said he regrets the oversight. Now, 2 survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing have won their High Court harassment case against a former TV producer who claims the attack was staged. Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve, who suffered life-changing injuries, sued Richard Hall after he published videos and a book alleging the bombing was a hoax. Mr. Hall claimed his actions, including filming Eve outside her home, were in the public interest as a journalist and that millions of people have bought a lie about the attack. However, the court ruled in their favour, dismissing Hall's claims as unfounded. And Sir Keir Starmer insists his relationship with Donald Trump is intact, despite claims Labour interfered in the US election. Trump's campaign filed a complaint accusing Labour of illegally supporting Kamala Harris, citing meetings between senior Labour officials and her team. Starmer dismissed the claims, stating Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. He emphasised his personal rapport with Trump, recalling their meeting in New York, and said he'll work with whoever becomes the next US president. The complaint remains under review by US federal election officials. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia. And yes, it seems to have all come to a head, doesn't it? We heard a few days back about the Labour staffers travelling to America to campaign for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. There was also the Labour MP Ruth Cadbury for Brentford and Isleworth, who boasted about her trip online, saying she was going to knock doors during recess. And now, as I said, it's all come to a head because Donald Trump's campaign team in the US has now made a formal legal complaint against the UK Labour Party over what they're calling, quote, blatant foreign interference in the US election. It's set to take place, of course, in less than 2 weeks' time. So the complaint's main focus is on Labour volunteers who have arrived in the US to campaign for Kamala Harris in critical battleground states, including Pennsylvania. Well, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has dismissed claims of interference and insists Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. Well, Nigel Farage, of course, he's campaigned for Donald Trump previously, not least this year and 4 years back. This is what he had to say earlier on GB News when Ellie Costello asked if he was being a bit of a hypocrite by slamming Labour.
When I've been spoken, by the way, I spoke in 2016 at a major Trump rally, and I did say, now I know it would be wrong of me to tell you how you should vote, but this is what happened in Brexit. Never underestimate the fact that actually the polls can be wrong. And I wasn't paid to do this. Here's the point. The Labour Party today are trying desperately to backtrack by saying people will be going at their own personal cost. Well, airfares to America right now are very, very expensive. There was no mention of that in the original advertisement at all.
OK, joining me now is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, I've used this analogy before when it comes to Labour scandals in the first 100-odd days, but it seems like comical Ali from Baghdad. The tanks are rolling in, nothing to see here, and Sir Keir Starmer says everything's fine. Not sure what the fuss is about.
Well, it is all a little bit awkward for Keir Starmer. He has made a statement, and so has Angela Rayner, and they both say that because these activists were volunteering in their own time and were not funded by the Labour Party, there was nothing untowards about it. And it is true that in recent elections there have always been a number of Labour activists going out to America to campaign for the Democratic Party. The question, and this is what the official body will be examining, is whether any of these activists paid over $1,000 for their plane tickets to America and back. If they did, then that would be seen to be considered a donation to Kamala Harris's election campaign, and then that could be ruled as foreign interference. So that is what Keir Starmer will be looking out for now. The other question at play is the seniority of some of the Labour staffers who appear to have been involved in the coordination of this trip of 100 activists over to the US. Sophia Patel, who's the Labour head of operations, made a post on LinkedIn where she said, "We will sort your accommodation." Now, obviously, that post has now been deleted, by the way. Obviously, lots of people took that to mean that their accommodation in America would be paid for by the Labour Party, which would, of course, be an example of foreign interference in the US election. The Labour Party strenuously denies that the accommodation of activists was paid for. And so it remains to be seen whether Sophia Patel's involvement was inappropriate. There were also two other very senior Labour staffers who were named, Matthew Doyle, who's the head of press, and Morgan McSweeney, the new chief of staff who took over from Sue Gray. Labour says that both of them were there of their own accord, not funded by the Labour Party. Let's see if that all stands up.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Appreciate that. Olivia Utley from Westminster. I guess the issue is, I mean, beyond whether it was paid for or not, or, you know, whether it was all above board and whether it is election interference, it's the... I dislike this word because it's been used so much, it's a cliche, but it's the optics. It's also a headache for people like David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. He spent a long, long time before Labour won the election trying to cosy back up to Trump after calling him, what was it, a racist Nazi sympathiser. Nigel Farage, in fact, brokered a meeting between Lammy's team and Trump's team prior to the election to try and, you know, settle their differences. But now it seems like some Labour lackeys, and of course Ruth Cadbury, the Labour MP for Brentford, seems to have given Starmer and Lammy a massive headache. And it does beg the question, does Sir Keir Starmer have control over his party? Well, let's get the view of former Democratic congressional candidate Qasim Rashid on this now from the US. Thanks for joining me. Good afternoon. Why does Kamala Harris and Tim Walz need help from the Labour Party, first of all? And also, Qasim, do you see an issue with kind of foreign political activists and indeed one MP, one politician, campaigning in foreign countries?
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know if they need help or don't need help. I think 100 people coming in is not going to make a massive difference. I mean, every person matters, of course, but to make this have to be some sort of massive foreign interference, I think is a bit of a, you know, they're blowing out of proportion for a number of reasons. One, as we know, the Conservatives Party in the UK have done this with Republicans in the past. There's nothing new here. Two, if we want to talk about an investigation, let's have the investigation. And I think that's one of the big differences between Democrats and Republicans here. If there's an accusation, have the investigation. No one is trying to hide anything, especially in a situation like this. But I think the third question is really the most important one here. One thing we've learned about Donald Trump is that every single accusation is a confession without fail. And so the real question is, what is he trying to hide? What interference is he trying to hide? We're already seeing Elon Musk bribe people with $1 million to vote, spend $75 million in dark PAC money. A CBS report just came out here in the United States that showed that 55% of his tweets on the election supporting Trump are misinformation and disinformation. This is the election interference that he's trying to distract from with something that's nominal. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but this whole thing about sorting out housing, it's common practice here that volunteers voluntarily give up their homes, offer an extra room for free for people to come in. So I think this is a big nothing burger. The bigger question we should be asking is, what is Donald Trump trying to distract from? It could be he's trying to distract from the fact that a report just came out that he openly praises Adolf Hitler as a great leader of sorts, and he wants generals like that.
That's been debunked, Qasim, as fake news already. Look, talking about... Let's talk...
No, his own chief of staff is admitting to it. So to debunk his own chief of staff, I think the one that Donald Trump handpicked... They've denied it. Trump's
team have called it a hoax. Can I just address your points about Elon Musk donating, giving away $1 million to encourage voting? I mean, what's the difference between that and, say, George Soros's group, who donated $60 million to super PACs in the first quarter of this year, to Democrat-linked super PACs? What's the difference?
Yeah, I agree. We need to get dark money out of politics altogether. There's no defending that whatsoever. I think the nuance that I'll also add is that Elon Musk owns Twitter, and he has put out more than, I think, 300 false and misleading tweets about election interference and election fraud, misleading voters, trying to deny people the right to vote or the access to vote by putting out misinformation and disinformation out there. And that, to me, to any fair-minded person, is absolutely election interference, and we shouldn't tolerate that in any respect.
Yeah. OK, Qasim Rashid, thank you for your company this afternoon. Appreciate it. Some breaking news in the past couple of minutes. Gunfire and explosions have been heard in the Turkish capital amid reports of a suspected terrorist attack. For more on this breaking news, let's head straight to GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who's in the studio with me now. Mark, what's going on in Turkey?
This is the TUSAS aerospace company based in Ankara. where, according to the Interior Minister, the area has been subject of a terrorist attack. We're looking at live pictures now of that facility. It's an aerospace company that makes engines for the Turkish military. We're told that a taxi arrived with a number of assailants inside. They opened fire with automatic weapons, and then there was the sound of an explosion as well. Turkish media reporting that this may well have been a suicide bomber. According to the Interior Minister, there are injuries and deaths as a result of what he is saying is a terrorist attack targeting this facility. We're still in the very early stages, as you see another ambulance heading towards, or a fleet of ambulances heading towards this aerospace company at the moment. We are working to get some other footage that we don't quite have yet, but that has the moment that the gunfire rang out at this facility, and there is the sound of an explosion as well. This has been played quite widely now on Turkish television. As I say, we're working to get that edited, and we'll play that to you as soon as we have it. But you can see, as I say, we still are very much in the early stages of this attack, because we still have emergency service vehicles, police and ambulance personnel arriving at the site here. As to who could be behind this deadly attack, well, we don't know at this stage. We know that, of course, the Turkish government have had significant issues in the past with the Kurdish militant group, the PKK, who have launched multiple attacks on Turkey over the years, and particularly they have targeted the likes of policing and military installations, but nothing to suggest any particular motive at the moment. We know that Turkey as well has grappled with an Islamist problem over the years, with particular attacks in Istanbul and Ankara and other locations around Turkey. So some real concern about who was behind this. Of course, how many people may have been caught up in this. It did happen, we believe, at one of the main entrances to this aerospace building, with the gunshots ringing out and then the explosions as well.
Yeah, we will endeavour to get those pictures to you shortly, viewers back home. There are pictures I'm looking at online now, if I can just describe them to you. It's the one man in particular carrying, I can't really describe the gun, it looks a lot bigger than a traditional sort of AK-47 rifle, but he makes his way up to turnstile-style entrances at the facility. This aerospace company seems to be at the head office, it appears, of this building, and starts opening fire on workers. Unconfirmed reports that there is 9 dead, but that is unconfirmed. And just remind us, Mark, again of the militant group, the PKK. The
PKK, the Kurdish militant. So you've got a Kurdish minority in Turkey, in Iran, in Iraq, but in Turkey, their militant arm, the PKK, have been fighting the Turkish government for many years for more autonomy and independence of the Kurdish elements within Turkey itself. So we know that there have been many attacks over the years that have been launched by the PKK, but we don't know as yet. The Turkish government is not laying the finger of blame at the moment in any one direction, because just as much of a problem for the Turkish government over the years has been the Islamist threat from the likes of Al-Qaeda and ISIS that have targeted institutions, facilities and civilians in Turkey as well. So it could be a number of different directions that the investigation goes on. But what they are saying at the moment, the Turkish government confirming that their belief is this was a terrorist attack, multiple gunmen and an explosion. Anil Sahin, who's a well-connected defence industry researcher, has told a local news outlet that the attack was carried out by multiple assailants who arrived at the compound in a taxi. Footage from IHA, one of the Turkish broadcasters, shows a heavily damaged yellow cab, which was reportedly involved in the initial explosion. As we see more ambulances and armoured personnel carriers arriving there as well, with either military or police personnel to the scene here. So several images carried by Turkish news outlets showed at least 2 attackers, one of them a woman, it says, advancing inside the compound and with long-barrelled rifles. And as you say, those reports that these gunmen, gunwoman, gunman were targeting employees at this Tusas aerospace company as well.
Yeah, just looking at the history of terrorist attacks in Turkey, you've had Kurdish militants before, the Islamic State group, and even leftist extremists all carrying out attacks in Turkey in the past. I think President Erdogan is in Russia currently for a BRICS meeting. That's the banking meeting, I believe, with the likes of Putin and so on. So he's not in the country. What about the terror threat worldwide, Mark? Anything for Brits to be concerned about, very briefly?
Well, of course, here in this country is substantial. It's a medium point at the moment. It has been at some stages up to critical, was then lowered to severe, meaning an attack was highly likely. It's now been lowered to substantial. That's always under review because there is an acknowledgement with the conflict in the Middle East in particular that there are potential threats. We had that terrorist attack in Hartlepool last year connected to the conflict in Gaza as well, in which that elderly gentleman was stabbed to death by a man who's now, of course, being convicted of that, an asylum seeker. So there is, of course, always a threat in this country. Incidentally, at one of our airports today, Birmingham Airport, there is a significant disruption that's been caused by an incident unfolding there with a vehicle that was suspicious in nature. All of the operations at Birmingham Airport have been cancelled, suspended, at least for the time being, and that's caused significant disruption. No indication that that is in any way connected to what is unfolding in Turkey, which is a confirmed terrorist attack, according to the Turkish authorities. OK, Mark, we'll keep a keen eye over the Turkey situation and, indeed, the Birmingham Airport situation. As you said, not linked at all. It could just be, you know, a loose, a random car that's causing trouble. But, stick with us on Martin Daubney on GB News. More small boat crossings yesterday. In fact, we'll catch up with Mark White about that later on in the show. I think it was 149 crossings yesterday, and that comes amid the sad news that 3 more people died crossing the channel overnight. A boat capsized off the coast of Calais. I think up to 45 people were rescued, but 3 did die, unfortunately. Elsewhere today in the Commons, the Home Secretary has announced that police firearms officers facing prosecution will be entitled to anonymity up to the point of conviction. And that crucially comes after Firearms Sergeant Martin Blake was yesterday acquitted of murdering Chris Cabba. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel. Back in a tick.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in 2021 with 2 main goals. One, educating the next generation to make sure that they know when they're growing up that naturally we have to take care of the planet and cleaning pollution that's already in the environment.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is Think Ocean's founder, Hugo Valdez-Vera, and the co-founder, Nolene Mariappan. Really good to see you both this morning. So, Nolene, let's start with you. What is Think Ocean and why did you want to start this back in 2021?
Yes, so Hugo had actually been working on the environment and climate action for quite a long time. when he moved to the UK, realised that there was a growing problem with plastic pollution and that more needed to be done because people weren't actually seeing the link between plastic, the impact on the environment and climate change. So he founded the organisation and I joined him with 3 goals, really. Education, looking at technology to scale solutions, and looking at how we develop more circular economy programs. So actually looking at reusing, recycling, actually creating local economies from what people would consider waste.
Hugo, just how bad is plastic pollution around the world, and especially here in the UK?
Well, it is bad, but we don't know the extent of how bad it is. You know, this is not much interest from the bigger players or, you know, some government for us to know every detail of the pollution. So if we know that is from 1 to 10 is 2, probably it's about 6.
Oh.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This afternoon, we're going to go back to Mark White now, who's in the studio with us. I think we have this clip and some updates to the Turkey terrorist attack in Ankara. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, yeah, the sound of the gunfire and the explosions could be heard. It's been played on Turkish television. As I said, we were endeavouring to get that to you. I think we can have a listen to it now.
Well, big explosion there, Mark.
Yeah, and an indication that some reports suggesting it was a suicide bomber, but there's other reports that indicate that a yellow taxi, and it's believed that the attackers had come in a taxi, had arrived in a taxi, that was damaged. So either, if it was a suicide bomber, they may have been standing next to the taxi, or actually the taxi itself was the bomb that exploded. So we'll await further confirmation on that, but clearly a significant event that is unfolding at the USAS aviation facility. This is a facility that makes engines and other components for Turkey's homegrown 5th generation fighter aircraft. So it's very important to the Turkish government, clearly, and the Turkish military. It is a vast complex here that employs thousands of people, about 40 minutes or so north of the Turkish capital, Ankara. OK, and again, completely unconfirmed, but there are reports that maybe hostages have been taken in this attack. We'll try and get some concrete details as the show develops. But, yeah, thank you, Mark White, for the latest on Turkey. We'll be back with you very shortly. OK, moving on. The Home Secretary today has revived a review into firearms officer accountability following the acquittal of police marksman Martin Blake for the killing of Chris Cabba. She said the current system for holding police officers to account is not commanding the confidence of either the public or the police, and announced the introduction of anonymity for officers subject to criminal trial. Well, let's get the views of the former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, Kevin Hurley. Good afternoon, Kevin. It does beg the question why Martin Blake wasn't given anonymity after being dragged through the courts for 2 years.
Yeah, it does. But the actual issue here is not really the anonymity. Of course, that's very important because we now hear that he's under potential threat from these gangsters. And I come from a family of police officers where some of us have faced precisely that. The real issue is here there are two people or two groups that need to be looked at. The first is the Independent Office of Police Conduct. I mean the Independent Office of Police Conduct and the Crown Prosecution Service. The Independent Office of Police Conduct should look into allegations of police wrongdoing with an independent mind, impartially, and go after the facts. In this particular case, as we see all the time, They are not impartial. They always take the side of the family of the alleged person that something bad has happened to, and they then pursue it from that position, i.e. they are not objective, they are subjective and unprofessional in the way in which they carry out their investigations and their recommendations.
Yeah.
The second point is the Crown Prosecution Service make the decisions on whether to prosecute based on 2 points. One, is there a reasonably good probability of gaining a conviction? And secondly, is pursuing the case in the public interest? Now, in this case, clearly, since the jury went out for 2 hours, 59 minutes, and also had their lunch break during it, there was clearly no realistic chance of getting a successful prosecution. Second point, was this in the public interest? Well, actually, it's in the public interest that these people you see on here now go forward against dangerous men to protect us. If you set the conditions where every time they think they're going to be second-guessed unreasonably because the Crown Prosecution Service will not grow a backbone because they're scared to death of criticism from left-wing politicians or activists, you're going to see that which we see now, a 25% reduction in applications to join firearms teams, and doubtless that situation will get worse. So the fault quite clearly lies with the Independent Office of Police Complaints, because they are not independent. They never, ever take an independent perception, unlike the police, actually, when they investigate matters.
Yeah.
Detectives, and I was one, we always chase the facts, get the facts before we decide.
Yeah.
And the second point is it's the duty of the Crown Prosecution Service to decide, A, is there a reasonable chance of a prosecution, and B, is it in the public interest?
All right, Kevin.
On both those points, they failed.
OK, Kevin Hurley, thanks very much. Of course, Martin Blake does have to face that IOPC gross misconduct charge next. So although he's been acquitted in court of murdering Chris Cabba, he may still lose his job. What do you think of that? gbnews.com/your say. Thanks, Kevin. Coming up very, very shortly, a GB News exclusive which has revealed civil servants blocked a Rwanda-style deal with Uganda because of concerns over LGBT rights. More on that in just a second, but first, your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:32. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. To recap on that breaking news coming out of Turkey now, where multiple people have been killed in a terror attack at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company. That's according to the country's interior minister. Local media is reporting a loud explosion and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire at the site in the Turkish capital of Ankara. It's understood at this point 3 people have been killed and 5 have been injured, and it is not yet clear who is behind the latest attack. We will bring you more on it as we get it. An investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. In other news, the Deputy Prime Minister has come under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs after the sinking of a migrant boat this morning. Filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions earlier, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club.
proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2948 and €1.2015. The price of gold is £2,105 and 39 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,279 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sophia. Let's get more now on the breaking news that Birmingham Airport has been evacuated. Our reporter Jack Carson is live for us outside the airport in the Midlands. Jack, what's going on up there?
Well, those passengers that have had to be evacuated from the airport from posts on social media are being taken to the National Exhibition Centre, which is right next door to Birmingham Airport. Just about 2 hours ago now, West Midlands Police and Birmingham Airport tweeted or posted on X, I should say, that the airport was being evacuated. A spokesperson for the West Midlands Police said Birmingham Airport is being evacuated following a report of a suspicious vehicle. They added that it was a precautionary measure to ensure the safety of passengers and staff, but the force did warn that passengers with flights this afternoon to contact their airline and check the airport's website for any updates. West Midlands Fire Service have also got units on standby. They say they've sent 2 officers currently on site working with the police. They sent those just after midday. They said local resources are also on standby should the situation escalate, but it's had a widespread disruption, not just at the airport, but also on transport links across the region as well, particularly with bus services, which are now not stopping at the airport as those passengers are escorted, as I mentioned, to the National Exhibition Centre, and also trains as well stopping at the airport as well. The airport is the 7th largest in the UK, more than 11 million passengers alone last year, but it is currently in the state of evacuation.
OK, Jack Carson at Birmingham Airport, thank you for that. Yeah, lots of passengers online complaining about being stuck on planes and, trying to go on holiday, quite frankly. One person says, I'm claustrophobic, I'm stuck on a plane, I'm pleading to get off. How long is this situation going to take? It's been hours so far. Keep your comments coming in, gbnews.com/your say. I'm Ben Leo, covering for Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fairly foggy start across the south, though that's clearing through this morning, leaving a largely dry day with plenty of sunny spells. Cloudier in the northwest, though, with some rain, though that is generally easing. That's as a result of a weather front that's just moving into the far north of Scotland. But otherwise, we've got high pressure building across the country, leaving plenty of dry and bright weather conditions across the UK. Perhaps that sunshine fairly weak at times with a build-up of cloud, but otherwise largely dry. Just the chance of the odd shower across Wales and the Midlands later, though you'll be rather unlucky if you catch any of those. Different story across Scotland, though. Plenty of cloud here, some rain at drizzle at times, and plenty of blustery winds feeding into the far northwest. Now, as we head into the evening, those winds are going to continue to strengthen across Scotland, particularly those exposed coasts in the far northwest, with a risk of gales overnight. Still plenty of cloud across the country too, though any rain and drizzle generally easing. Quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but otherwise across the south, plenty of clear skies to end the day. Now, where we see those clear skies overnight is going to turn rather chilly, though not turning quite as chilly as it did last night. Perhaps still some pockets of mist and fog, but once again not quite as foggy as it was this morning. Across Scotland, though, those winds will continue to strengthen, a risk of gales overnight and a chance we may just start to see some rain clip the Outer Hebrides. But otherwise, a largely dry night and most towns and cities remaining in the high single figures, low double digits. Now, through the course of tomorrow, once again, plenty of blustery winds across Scotland with a risk of coastal gales, and we'll continue to see that cloud spill in from the northwest with some outbreaks of rain, particularly by the afternoon. Western parts of Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of Scotland seeing some heavy downpours by the time we reach the afternoon. Otherwise, mostly dry elsewhere and feeling pleasant where you catch the sunshine.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in West Yorkshire. It's all due to an accident just after junction 22 Rishworth Moor. Queues going back towards junction 21 Milne Road. There's also slow traffic on the opposite carriageway due to onlookers. Slow for the M6 southbound in Cheshire. It's partially blocked due to an accident between junction 21 Woolston heading towards junction 20, the Lim interchange. Slow traffic on the M1 southbound in Northamptonshire. 2 lanes closed for an accident between junction 17 for the M45 heading towards junction 16 Daventry, that's in the roadworks area. Queues on the M25 clockwise in Kent. It's all due to an accident between junction 1A, the QE2 bridge, and junction 1B for Dartford. And there's a lane closed on the M25 anti-clockwise in Surrey between junction 9 Leatherhead and 8 for Reigate.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, we can exclusively reveal that civil servants in the Foreign Office blocked a proposed Rwanda-style deportation deal with Uganda because of concerns over their record on human rights, in particular with regards to LGBT issues. Our man, GB News national reporter Charlie Peters can fill us in with the details now. Charlie, this sounds extraordinary. What's been going on?
Well, in April 2022, we announced the Rwanda deal under the leadership of Priti Patel, the Home Secretary at the time. That was the British move. Of course, it never got off the ground. It was scrapped most recently by this Labour government. But I'm able to reveal today that the Priti Patel era government of Tory rule were also considering a deal with Uganda at the same time. Whitehall sources telling me that they reached out. They were also interested in the proposals, and there were conversations taking place at the embassy level to secure this. Now, as I understand it, multiple Whitehall sources have told me that that plan, that proposal, was then blocked as objections were thrown up by civil servants cross-government, but in particular from the Foreign Office, due to human rights concerns in Uganda, particularly when it comes to LGBT rights. Uganda has very strict rules on LGBT rights. Homosexuality is punishable by death in some circumstances. Same-sex relations, couples, marriage, it's all criminalised, it's all forbidden. And under the rules of the ECHR and our own human rights legislation, you can't deport someone if you think there is a risk of degrading or treatment or torture or etc. And so they saw this as being a deal that couldn't be done, and that was the reason I was told that it never went forward. So
it does beg the question, Charlie, who's in charge of government policy? Is it politicians who are elected by British people, or is it unnamed, unelected civil servants?
Well, Ben, I mean, civil servants can't pass legislation. It's not their job. But the sources that I spoke to for this story said that they believed this deal could have been achieved if there was sufficient political will. They said that the ministers involved, and this went right up to the Prime Minister's office at the time, Rishi Sunak, they didn't have the political drive and the leadership to take this over the line. And so the objections that the Foreign Office and other civil servants put forward, while strong, obviously they could have been overcome and overpowered by the political leadership and the powers of lever that ministers hold. But they said in this case, that wasn't done.
OK, so they were scared about the ECHR. So why, in that case, does the Netherlands consider this a good scheme? You know, just across the pond to Holland or the Netherlands, they're proposing it, they're considering it, and they think it can be done. Why can't we do it?
Right, just a week ago, the Dutch government said that they considered Uganda a hospitable country. Many other European nations are now considering similar deals to the one that we just scrapped with Rwanda. Germany is also looking at a deal with Rwanda, and it has also managed to deport Afghans back to Afghanistan, and that's certainly not considered a safe country under ECHR rulings. We've seen several scenarios where European countries have broken with the convention. In some cases, like France, they've even paid fines after Strasbourg has ruled that they've made a mistake or they've done the wrong thing legally. So it does beg the question, if the ECHR really is this overwhelming power that stops you from deporting, why does so many continental powers have the opportunity to do it? At the same time, though, Robert Jenrick, I spoke to him for this story. I approached both Conservative candidates. Camille Badenoch didn't offer a response about this revelation, but Robert Jenrick said this shows that we need to leave European laws about immigration and that we'd be freed up to do more deportations if we weren't attached to...
Just very briefly, because we're pushed for time, in light of no deterrent, Rwanda's gone. There were more crossings yesterday across the English Channel.
That's right, Ben. 240 migrants made it to the UK in small boats. After this morning's deaths, 3 people confirmed to have died after that. 40 people ended up in the water, we're told. So the total now for crossings for this year, 28,600, a 9% rise over the equivalent from last year. Lots of questions for the government about whether their plan to tackle the gangs is really going to work.
Yep, smash the gangs. Yet to see it. Charlie Peters, thank you very much. Great as always. And yeah, Robert Jenrick will be live with me in this studio at about 5 o'clock. So we will ask him about his promises to leave the ECHR if indeed he can do it. Also, in just a few minutes, we'll be discussing how public sector workers' golden pension pots are set to be spared in Rachel Reeves' national insurance tax raid next week. Is she the Chancellor of Inequality? I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You could, if you're getting a bit bored later on and you've got some free time, tune in to Friends. Do you remember that?
It's on somewhere in the world all the time.
Probably one of those
incredible.
Obscure TV channels.
It's a big anniversary today, because apparently today was 30 years ago, was when it first hit the screens.
In 1994. Just before, or just after I was born, 89 me. The show ran for 10 series, becoming one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, and it scored numerous accolades, including 62 Primetime Emmy nominations. Joining us now in the studio to talk everything Friends and the big anniversary is showbiz reporter Steph Tetchy and my friend as well.
Happy Friends-iversary, guys. Yes, today is quite a monumental day for one of the most incredible sitcoms to ever hit our TV screens.
That it's on somewhere in the world.
There's millions of people around the world who are watching reruns, watching either streaming of Friends, and it doesn't get boring for people. I think, 30 years later, just that it's such a simple concept. 6 New Yorkers just following their lives and their friendships. It proved a hit with loads of viewers worldwide.
The casting was super.
It was so incredible, and the thing is, these were all fresh faces at the time. It wasn't like they picked people who were at the top of the game then. And I think it was such a hit with viewers is because they became our friends as well over the years. But obviously today is played with a bit of poignancy because, there is one friend that is missing. And the creators of the show, Martha Kaufman and David Crane, saying that today is a bit fraught for both the cast because of Matthew Perry's passing. And he was known as one of the funniest friends, as most people would describe him as. And so today is kind of marred with sadness.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Thank you for your company. Keep your comments coming in, gbnews.com/yoursay, and I promise I will get to them very, very shortly. Time now for the Great British Giveaway, and the clock is ticking on getting your entry in as lines are closing on Friday, just 2 days' time. Make sure you don't miss out on your chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need to make it yours.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Make sure you don't miss out. Get your entry in now. Just one entry could make you the winner. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, one entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Very good luck to you. Friday is the deadline. Do not miss it. A whopping amount of money to win. And imagine how good it would be at Christmas as well, having that in your back pocket. Now, it's been revealed that public sector workers are set to be spared from the Chancellor's move to increase national insurance contributions on employers' contributions to retirement funds in the budget. That's being announced next Wednesday, of course. That's despite complaints that this would be a straightforward breach of Labour's manifesto and, therefore, the burden will come entirely from the private sector. So the question begs, is Rachel Reeves to become the Chancellor of Inequality? Well, we can get the view now of the Chair of Women Against State Pension Inequality, Angela Madden. Angela, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. What's your thoughts on this? Are you a bit irked by this revelation?
Good afternoon, Ben. I'm not sure it's a revelation as yet, is it? Is it gossip? Because Rachel Reeves hasn't actually released what she's going to say in the budget yet, has she?
No, lots of rumour and speculation in recent weeks, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, all sorts going around. But if indeed this is what she does with public sector pensions, where would that leave you? How would you feel?
It's a difficult one to call. I personally don't think it's something the government will do because they want to gain money, don't they, to pay a big hole. If they leave out a huge section of employers, then they won't achieve that aim.
Is this just another capitulation to the unions, do you think, if indeed Rachel Reeves does announce this next week?
Well, there are many public service unions. There's as many public service unions as there are private unions working in the private sector. So I don't see that it can be a kind of a sop to the unions.
OK, and does this, just explain for our viewers who aren't sort of up to date with it, I mean, I'm not massively clued up on pensions, I know the basics, but does it risk exacerbating the already huge divide between public and private pension provisions?
Well, you're right. There is a huge divide between public and private pensions division, and this wouldn't do anything to help it. And that's one of the reasons that I don't think it will happen. I just don't think it's the kind of thing that a new government would do.
OK, well, I suppose many people said that about the winter fuel allowance and pensioners, Angela. Were you expecting them to do that?
No, we weren't.
No.
And that affects many WASPy women. We did a survey last winter and 1 in 3 WASPy women couldn't afford their bills then. So not having the winter fuel allowance will just make that worse. Yeah. We will actually be outside Parliament on Budget Day demonstrating for our own aim, which is, of course, to get compensation from the government for the injustices we suffered by not knowing about our state pension age changes.
Yeah, you have been treated terribly, some would argue, and I know you say that it's not likely next week, but who knows? As we've alluded to, as we've said, nobody was expecting them to take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners, especially after Keir Starmer in the Commons was berating Rishi Sunak for months on end, accusing him of wanting to do the same thing. So I guess they're full of surprises, this Labour government. Yeah. Angela Madden, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with me.
Thanks.
Right, let's get some very quick views in before we kick off our next hour. John, just on the fact we've got Robert Jenrick at around 5 o'clock, I'm going to be speaking to the Tory leadership hopeful. John, you say, Ben, the Tory party is going to tear itself apart over the ECHR. Just wait and see. Only Nigel and Reform guarantee 100% to leave the ECHR and create a new British Bill of Human Rights. Yeah, good point. I'm going to ask that to Robert Jenrick. He can talk the talk and make all the promises and the pledges you like, but in actual fact, he's saying that he wants to unite the party and stop the drama. That was his buzzword, Robert Jenrick, stop the drama. But if he goes down this path of wanting to leave the ECHR, some would argue he's got half a party full of Lib Dems and what some would call the wets, who don't want to go that way. So on what planet is that going to unite the party? Who knows? More on that to come, and as I said, Robert Jenrick is here at about 5 o'clock, so stay tuned for that. Plenty more to come in the next hour, including the latest on that terror attack in the Turkish capital. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now time for your weather with Orana Criswick.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into this afternoon, there's going to be plenty of dry and bright weather around, plenty of hazy, sunny spells. Still fairly windy in the northwest of Scotland though, shown quite clearly here with the squeeze and the isobars across the bigger picture. But generally we do have high pressure building across much of the country, and that means a mix of cloud and clear spells for much of England and Wales. Northern Ireland fairly cloudy across Scotland too, with blustery winds, a risk of gales by the time we reach the morning, and just some rain starting to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Otherwise, elsewhere, largely dry under those clear spells, feeling a little bit chilly, not quite as chilly as it was last night though. Through into tomorrow morning, then we'll still see plenty of cloud across Scotland, still with those blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts of the northwest, and we will continue to see that rain just start to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start, similar across the north of England, a fair amount of cloud, and then a mix of cloud and clear spells. Most of the clear spells across East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent too, and that generally sets us up for the rest of the day. There will be some cloudy spells at times, the best of the sunshine across East Anglia, Sussex and Kent, and we will continue to see those strong winds in western areas, particularly the northwest of Scotland once again, where there is the risk of those coastal gales, and that rain once again slowly pushing into the far west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So some outbreaks of rain in the west, but otherwise largely dry, and with highs of around 17, 18, feeling rather pleasant for the time of year. Into the evening, that rain will continue to push its way eastwards across the country, and then it will move erratically across much of England and Wales as we head into Friday, leading us into a fairly unsettled weekend with some rain and showers. Otherwise, that's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in West Yorkshire. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 22 Rishworth Moor heading towards 23 for Huddersfield. Queues going back towards 21 Mill Road. Very slow on the opposite carriageway as traffic slows to look at the accident. We're seeing slow traffic for the M61 southbound in Manchester at junction 1, the Swinton interchange. Queues on the M6 southbound in Cheshire. Firstly, it's partially blocked due to an accident between junction 21 Woolston heading towards junction 20, the Lim interchange. We've also got a lane closed for a broken down vehicle on the M6 southbound between junction 17 Sandbach and 16 for Crewe, and slow on the M1 southbound in Northamptonshire due to an earlier accident in the roadworks between junction 17, the M45 and 16 for Daventry. News.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be next.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. Winning the money enabled me to treat my children, which I've not been able to do for a while. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. with, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, thanks for your company. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Ben Leo, bringing you all the latest on the big stories of the day until 6 p.m. We're showing you live pictures now from the Turkish capital after their interior minister confirmed Ankara has been the target of a terrorist attack this afternoon. We'll have all the latest on that throughout the show. Latest reports suggest 3 dead, many injured, and we have some rather disturbing video and pictures to show you as well. Mark White will be here very, very shortly with an update. Elsewhere, Donald Trump is launching legal action against Sir Keir Starmer's party after Labour staffers campaigned for Democratic candidate Kamala Harris in key battleground states in the US. Just how bad could this be for UK-American relations if President Trump does indeed return to the White House? And has Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick's campaign run out of momentum? Some critics suggest so. He'll be here to tell us whether it has very, very soon. That's all coming in your next hour. And what would you ask Robert Jenrick, the Tory leadership hopeful? He wants to be the Conservative leader. He wants to be Prime Minister, possibly in 5 years. Send your questions, gbnews.com/your say, and I'll endeavour to read and ask him the best ones from there. A big 2 hours coming up, but first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. To Turkey now, where multiple people have been killed in a terror attack at the headquarters of Defence on an aerospace company. That's according to the country's interior minister. Local media is reporting loud explosions and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire at the site in the Turkish capital of Ankara. It's understood at this point 3 people are known to have been killed and 14 injured. It is not yet clear who is behind the latest attack. An investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage, where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. In other news now, operations have now returned to normal at Birmingham Airport after an evacuation, and all flights were suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle. In a post on social media, the airport advised travellers to check their latest flight information and apologised for any inconvenience and disruption, saying the safety and security of everyone at the airport was our #1 priority. Turning to the House of Commons now, where Angela Rayner's been filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions. The Deputy Prime Minister came under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs. It's after the deadly sinking of a migrant boat in the English Channel this morning. In response, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Meanwhile, Labour peer Lord Ali is facing fresh criticism after reports revealed 4 minor breaches in the registration of his interests. The House of Lords Commissioner for Standards found that he failed to register himself as an unremunerated director of a foundation and neglected to maintain accurate records for a company he controlled. However, the Commissioner deemed them minor, requiring only a letter of apology, which Lord Ali has now provided. In his letter, he acknowledged the breaches and said he regrets the oversight. Giselle Pellicot, the French woman at the centre of a landmark trial of 50 men who were accused of raping her, has taken to the stand, sending a powerful message to survivors of sexual violence. After being drugged and assaulted by her then-husband, she is standing against the men accused of her abuse. In her testimony, the 72-year-old urged other victims to shed their shame, saying it's not for us to have shame, it's for them. With an open trial and the showing of evidence, Giselle hopes to inspire other survivors. And Sir Keir Starmer insists his relationship with Donald Trump is intact, despite claims Labour interfered in the US election. Trump's campaign filed a complaint accusing Labour of illegally supporting Kamala Harris, citing meetings between senior Labour officials and her team. Starmer dismissed the claims, stating Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. He emphasised his personal rapport with Trump, recalling their meeting in New York, and said he'll work with whoever becomes the next US president. The complaint remains under review by US federal election officials. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia. Now, casualties have been confirmed in the Turkish capital of Ankara as the government says it is responding to a terrorist attack. For more on this breaking news now, let's speak to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's in the studio. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, this incident, we think, is still ongoing, although there are reports that 2 terrorists involved in this have been shot, have been killed by Turkish authorities. But we're also getting reports that 3 people have been killed, not terrorists, but 3 members of the public, or at least potentially the workforce within this aerospace company in Ankara, and 14 others injured. You're looking at live shots there of the scene outside this aerospace, the aerospace company, which is a very important part of the military-industrial complex in Turkey as it manufactures engines and other components for Turkey's homegrown 5th-generation fighter jet. So a very sort of important element, really, in that country's sort of defence capacity. I think we can bring you some sound that we now have of the gunfire and explosions that took place just as this terrorist attack was unfolding. And there's some other footage that we can bring you that actually shows 2 of the attackers. No, we don't have that.
No, don't have that, unfortunately. What does it show? We'll try endeavour to get it up. What does it show?
It shows 2 attackers, we believe, a man and a woman, with automatic weapons by a yellow taxi at that point opening fire. There is what we think may be a victim lying beside the taxi, just their legs visible on the roadway just beside the taxi itself. And then there's another angle of the two attackers making their way through some security bollards, presumably into the building itself. Now, that is clearly of concern, because if they're through security and into the building, that's where the workforce is, and two attackers with automatic weapons can do a lot of damage. So the initial reports are 3 people killed and 14 injured, and then the two of the terrorists killed at this stage as well.
Mark, I know it's very early to speculate, but any idea who could be behind this attack? Previous terror attacks in Turkey have come from Islamic State, the PKK Kurdish group, even far-left extremists. Any idea who's responsible on this occasion?
Well, all of the above. They've had their problems from all of these different groups over the years. The PKK are a continual thorn in the side of the Turkish government, and they particularly target the likes of policing and military infrastructure within Turkey, as well as civilian infrastructure at times as well. But Islamist threat, from ISIS and Al-Qaeda over the years have launched many attacks in Ankara, in Istanbul, and other Turkish locations. And as you say, yes, the far left militants and terrorist groups have also been involved in launching attacks. So they face a threat from multiple fronts in Turkey that they've been grappling with over the years. But the Turkish authorities have not yet come out, and not surprising, we're still in the very early stages of this incident. We've seen from the live shots vehicles, emergency services arriving at the scene, still arriving at the scene. So still an incident unfolding. I don't know. We don't have the live footage anymore either.
Yeah, have we got that clip? No, we haven't got it. So the pictures doing the rounds online is, one chap who's seen entering the front building of this aerospace company. There's turnstile-style entrances where I assume staff go into. There's this one chap who's dressed in pretty much all black. He's carrying what appears to be an AK-47 automatic rifle. And there are reports, Mark, I don't know if you've managed to confirm or deny these, that some hostages were taken. Have you heard any more on that?
Well, there's no indication of that. We don't have the live shot at all from Turkey that we were showing? No, so there's no indication of... thank you. No indication that anybody has been taken hostage at all at this stage. Certainly the government hasn't confirmed that. Of course, the information that you get with these unfolding, particularly marauding terrorist attacks, can be very confusing. And the first accounts that come out often are corrected within the hours of a situation unfolding. But we do know there have clearly been multiple casualties in what has been a significant terrorist attack involving multiple attackers using explosives and using weapons at this stage. And we're seeing people, the media and others gathered outside this facility. So in the outer perimeter, things are calm, but we've been seeing, as dusk falls now in this area of northern Ankara, that there are still emergency service vehicles arriving. We can still see the blue lights, in fact, just through the silhouettes of people there at that point. So still a very active scene from what we can see.
Yes, and I think President Erdogan is at the BRICS summit in Russia, no less, with Vladimir Putin. So he's not even in the country, the Turkish president. I wonder if he'll race back to deal with this crisis. But Mark, thank you for that. We will get more detail as the show progresses. Thank you, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. OK, stateside, Donald Trump's campaign team has made a formal legal complaint against the UK Labour Party over what they call blatant foreign election interference. The election, of course, set to take place in less than 2 weeks' time, and their complaint is, well, the main focus is on Labour volunteers and staffers who have arrived in the US to campaign for Democratic candidate Kamala Harris in critical battleground states such as Pennsylvania. Now, today, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has dismissed claims of interference and insists Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. Well, joining us now is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, the Prime Minister saying nothing to see here, Gov, no problem, but some people very upset with what's happening, not least the Republicans, but Elon Musk and, of course, Nigel Farage.
Yes, this concerns about 100 Labour activists and a few Labour staff members too, who have travelled over to the US in order to campaign for Kamala Harris. Now, Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer have both made statements today saying that these activists travelled on their own money and in their own free time, and pointed out that there is a precedent for Labour activists going over to America to campaign in previous elections. In fact, it's happened in all 5 of the last elections, apart from the one that was held in the middle of the COVID pandemic. That said, it is possible that Donald Trump does have a case here, because foreign volunteers coming over from the UK to the US are not allowed to donate to a presidential campaign. Now, there's no indication that any of these 100 or so activists have actually given money to the campaign, but if any of them are found to have spent more than $1,000 on their return tickets to America, that would count as a donation to the campaign. And given how high the price of air flights to the US are at the moment, it is quite possible that some of those activists breach the terms. The other question at play here is some of these senior staffers who have been involved in coordinating that group of activists travelling over to the US. Among them, Sophia Patel, who's the Labour head of operations. She posted on LinkedIn saying that accommodation would be sorted for activists who wanted to travel to America. Now, the Labour Party have said very strenuously that that does not mean that the Labour Party paid for accommodation for any of those activists, which would indeed count as foreign interference. But we'll have to see where all of that lands. At the moment, though, it is certainly really awkward for Keir Starmer. It's not good optics at all. He spent the last 6 months, and actually really quite a lot of his time as leader of the opposition, showing that if he were Prime Minister, he would be prepared to have a functioning, cordial relationship with a Donald Trump presidency. Now it feels as though that relationship is frayed almost to breaking point.
Yes, Olivia, thank you very much. Yeah, Labour have spent a long time this year especially trying to cosy up to Trump's team, not least David Lammy, who met Trump in a meeting engineered by David Lammy, because, of course, David Lammy has said some not so nice things about him before in the past. But, yeah, it just does make you wonder whether Keir Starmer's got a hold of his party. Olivia Utley, thank you, in Westminster. Let's cross now to US political commentator and former Republican representative John Lee Boutillier. John, are you there? Oh, we've got a black screen. There we go. Just me. There we go. Yeah, it wasn't just Labour staffers and activists who went over. It was the Labour MP for, as far as I remember, Brentford and Isleworth, who some weeks ago boasted online that she was going to campaign in Pennsylvania. She was knocking doors, holding Harris Waltz placards. And it's one thing having staffers doing it, and it's another having an MP doing it. And Nigel Farage's defence of this, because this morning, I'm not sure if we've got this clip, but Ellie Costello quizzed him on whether he was being, Nigel Farage, a hypocrite. Because Nigel, of course, has campaigned for Trump in recent years. He's been over there sharing a stage with him. Nigel's response was, A, I'm not in government, as Labour are. He's a humble Clacton MP at the moment. And the second thing is that he wasn't paid. So the big question is, have these Labour staffers been paid? Have we got that clip? There we go.
When I've been spoken, by the way, I spoke in 2016 at a major Trump rally, and I did say, now I know it would be wrong of me to tell you how you should vote, but this is what happened in Brexit. Never underestimate, the fact that actually the polls can be wrong. And I wasn't paid to do this. Here's the point. The Labour Party today are trying desperately to backtrack by saying people will be going at their own personal cost. Well, airfares to America right now are very, very expensive. There was no mention of that in the original advertisement at all.
OK, well, that was Nigel's response when asked if he's being a big, massive hypocrite by Ellie Costello. Let's get the thoughts now of former Republican Representative John Lee Boutillier. John, are you there?
I am here, and I've watched every single bit of this story that you've done and over the last week. And from an American perspective, it would be better if Labor did not send these people over here. It doesn't really help Kamala Harris. She has 140,000 volunteers have signed up through her website to help her campaign. How are 100 people from Great Britain going to make any difference? And they've become a distraction. The story's a distraction. It's giving Trump a little help to give him something to hammer people with. If Labour wanted to help Kamala, the better move would have been keep the 100 people in Great Britain and have them on the phone and holding meetings with Americans abroad who are in Great Britain, working, living there, but who vote here back in America by absentee mail. And they are ripe for campaigning and wouldn't be offended, I don't think, if in that country, Labour called them up, said, hey, we're here to tell you that we favor Kamala because of this and that. No controversy. Sending them over here to Nevada and Pennsylvania, not going to work.
And John, Donald Trump isn't one to forgive and forget, is he? He's notorious for keeping grudges. So how do you think the likes of Keir Starmer and the Labour government will fare if Donald Trump does win in a couple of weeks' time?
Well, Trump is insane. He's insane. You never know what he's going to do. He may forget it completely, but he may not. And at a key time, if he's president again, and I hope to hell he's not, but if he is...
Why don't you hope he's president again?
Because he is out of his mind. He's in the pocket of Vladimir Putin.
Have you got any proof for that?
Oh, come on. I mean, he's having private phone calls with him. He's shipping COVID tests to him early in the pandemic when no one could get these machines.
I mean, John, come on, that was just some article in The Atlantic. I don't think anything's been stood up. I mean, what do you make of the Russia collusion hoax? That plagued him for 4 years. That was proved to be absolute nonsense.
Wait a second. Hold on. That is not true. Now, Bob Woodward interviewed Donald Trump repeatedly, and he has reported in his new book called War that Donald Trump privately talked to Vladimir Putin. This is when he's president, when COVID is just beginning. And there were these large machines that were the only way to find out if you had COVID. And he sent several of those privately, secretly, over to Vladimir Putin. And Putin said to him, don't tell anybody about this. It won't help you.
John, he denies that. He denied. The camp denies that. They say it's a hoax. And we had... John, let me just finish. Let me just finish this point. We had 4 years of Trump being accused of colluding with Russia. It was all a hoax. It was a massive hoax engineered by the Clinton campaign. We have to go, unfortunately, John, because we've got to move on with the show. But John Le Boutillier, thank you very much for joining me. We'll catch up soon. I'd like to extend that chat. Unfortunately, we're pushed for time. In just a moment, I'll be speaking to Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick about whether his campaign has lost momentum. Some people suggesting so, others thinking not. I'm going to get stuck into that in just 2 minutes. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
I'm joined now by an acknowledged authority on Ludwig van Beethoven. He's already written 7 books on the subject, and next week his 8th is released. It's called In Search of Beethoven, and it stands apart as a deeply personal account of John Souché's relationship with the great composer as he follows his footsteps from Bonn to Vienna. Yes, I introduce author, journalist and classic FM presenter John Souché.
Hello, Michael.
It's delightful to have you here, and you have, as I say, written now 8 books on Beethoven. So the question is, why Beethoven?
Well, the word that is often used that I don't like is obsession, obsessive, because somehow there's something not quite right about that. The word that I use is passion. I have a passion for this man's life and music that began, I suppose, around 50 years ago, sometime in my early 20s. I can't remember the exact moment. He kind of crept up on me, and suddenly, as I was a journalist, TV journalist all my life, but before that I was a failed musician. I wanted to be a professional musician, but fortunately for the world of music, I realised I didn't have the talent. But this man's music crept up on me, and I knew from then that it would not go away, it would only increase, and that is what's happened. There are other composers I will listen to, minor names like Mozart, Wagner, Haydn, but Beethoven just does it for me. I was highly educated musically at school because I loved it, to the extent that I wanted to turn professional, but as I say, I didn't have the talent, but that has stayed with me. I read music, I understand music, as you say, I play the trombone, in those days to quite a high level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, yesterday, Suella Braverman endorsed Robert Jenrick in the Tory leadership race, saying he has clear policies on issues such as defence, housing, economic growth and energy, and that's what matters to voters the most. The winner of the Tory leadership race will be announced on November the 2nd, and Robert Jenrick joins me now. Robert, thank you for joining me this afternoon. First of all, there was an article in The Spectator from James Hill, good to see you, who suggested that your campaign had lost momentum. What's your response to that?
I think this is neck and neck, this contest. I've been working incredibly hard. We've been out across all of the country. I've done 200 meetings with members of the Conservative Party, and all is to play for. I'm going to continue doing that right up until the close of the ballots at the end of this month. I'm trying to put across very clearly my vision for the future of this party and the country, how we can have very serious, credible policies on things like how we ensure the NHS performs better for the patients by sacking the bad managers and empowering the good ones, how we get growth going again in the economy by having a different energy policy, going for cheap and reliable energy, giving our young people real skills, not just low-value degrees, how we get young people on the housing ladder, and yes, on immigration, how we control and reduce legal migration by capping it in the tens of thousands in Parliament, and how we stop the farce of the small boats by ensuring that we leave the European Convention on Human Rights. So very clear, specific, substantive policies to restore the trust and the confidence of the public in our party and our country.
What do you make of the fact Kemi Badenoch, your rival in this contest, doesn't seem to have any, or is reluctant to at least, let her policies and ambitions be known?
Well, we've taken different approaches. I believe that the Conservative Party has to restore the trust of the public with substantive policies so that you know exactly where I stand on the big issues of the day. Are we going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights or not? Well, I stand for leaving it so we can end the small boats crisis and get a control on our borders. Are we going to have a cap in Parliament on legal migration or not? Well, I stand for a cap in Parliament because I think it's incredibly important that we bring down legal migration to the tens of thousands and restore trust on that issue. I think a plan today is worth a lot more than the promise of one tomorrow. That's my approach.
OK, Robert, I've been calling for questions from some of our viewers ahead of your appearance this afternoon. Adrian has said, could you ask Mr Jenrick how he would propose to leave the ECHR when the majority, as he describes, of the party don't want to do it?
Well, I don't think that the position is quite as divided as some suggest. Most people within the Conservative Party now agree that the European Convention on Human Rights isn't working in the interests of the public and they want to reform it. My position is just one step further than that. I'm born out of my own experience as a minister, having travelled around Europe, spoken to legal experts and others. I know that it's not possible to reform it. That requires the unanimous approval of 46 member states. There's no agenda, there's no process to do that. So I'm just urging the party to go one step further, to leave and to replace it with a British Bill of Rights that enshrines the freedoms and right to the British public in our own law, meaning that Parliament is sovereign again, completing the process that we began with Brexit. I think that's the right approach, and I'm confident that I can bring the Parliamentary Party with me on that journey.
OK, and just talking about Parliament, James has said, would we need a vote in Parliament to leave the ECHR? What's the mechanics of it? How would you practically get it done?
Well, the technical process is giving notice, which doesn't require a vote in Parliament, but I think it would be better to do that. That's the experience we learnt with Brexit. So we would do that, and then we would get on and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. And there are brilliant lawyers and jurists like Lord Jonathan Sumption who have set out how you could do that. And that could actually improve the position of some of the rights that are under threat in our country at the moment, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, property rights, things that we as Conservatives want to ensure that we protect for future generations.
And just a final one. You talk the talk that members want to hear, Mr Jenrick. You want to leave the ECHR. Lots of our viewers would agree with that as well. But the issue is, how do people trust you anymore? How do people trust your party? Because you had 14 years of people begging for you to do the right thing, getting hold of legal and illegal migration, and quite frankly, they'd argue that you failed.
Look, I understand that anger and frustration. I share it myself. I fought relentlessly when I was in Cabinet to reduce the numbers coming into our country. I secured the biggest ever reduction in legal migration, 300,000 a year. I increased deportations from the UK by 70% in 12 months. I ended 100 of those asylum hotels that were wasting taxpayers' money, and I reduced the numbers coming here on small boats by over a third, the only minister ever to reduce the numbers coming in. So my track record, I hope, speaks for itself, gives credibility to me that people can trust me on this issue. And they also know that when I couldn't secure more, I ultimately chose to resign from Cabinet and join 60 Conservative colleagues in pressing for the law to be changed, to hive out the European Convention on Human Rights. And had my advice been taken then, we would have stopped the boats, we would have got flights off to Rwanda. So I have a track record, and I've got very clear policies, unlike my opponent in this race, in order for us to take it forward. So I hope that members of the party can trust me on this issue, and that we'll begin to slowly rebuild the trust and the confidence of the wider public if I'm lucky enough to lead the party forward in 2 weeks' time.
OK, just lastly, if you wouldn't mind, what do you make of this international diplomatic row brewing at the moment between the looming Trump administration, some may say, and these Labour activists, and even Ruth Cadbury, the MP, who have been in America campaigning for Harris-Walz?
Well, firstly, you'd think that the Labour Party would have more to deal with here rather than sending their staffers out to the United States. They've lost Sue Gray, their chief of staff. They're tanking in the polls. Their budget is a mess at the end of this month. So they should focus on doing their jobs here, not going off to meddle in international politics. But I think it's clearly a misjudgment. They shouldn't be damaging relations with either side in this US presidential election. We want to have the best, most constructive relationship with the next president of the United States. That matters for our national security, our foreign policy, our trade. It's in the British national interest that whoever is president of the United States can have confidence and can work closely with the Prime Minister of this country. And I'm afraid that's been jeopardised by Keir Starmer.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thank you for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciate it. That's Robert Jenrick, who is hoping, of course, to become the next Conservative Party leader. The results will be announced on November the 2nd. Who will replace Rishi Sunak? Will it be that gentleman there, Robert Jenrick, who wants to leave the ECHR? Or will it be his rival, Kemi Badenoch, who says, no, I'm not keen on leaving the ECHR. We need to do things a better way. Right, let's get your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. It's 4:31. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines from the GB Newsroom. To Turkey now, where multiple people have been killed in a terror attack at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company. Local media is reporting a loud explosion and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire at the site in the Turkish capital of Ankara. It's understood at this point 4 people are known to have been killed and 14 injured, some in a critical condition. And it is not yet clear who is behind the attack. The Turkish Interior Minister is speaking now, giving an update, so we will bring you more as we get it. Back in the UK, an investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage, where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. Operations have now returned to normal at Birmingham Airport after an evacuation, and all flights were suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle. In a post on social media, the airport advised travellers to check their latest flight information and apologised for any inconvenience and disruption, saying the safety and security of everyone at the airport was our #1 priority. The Deputy Prime Minister's come under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs after the sinking of a migrant boat this morning. Filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions earlier, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia. Lots more to come in the show. If you want to get in contact, it's gbnews.com/yoursay. I am trying to go through all the comments and views in order to read them out. There are plenty there. Gary, you say Robert Jenrick is all talk, did nothing when he could have, useless. I mean, he just spent the interview there arguing his case. He said he brought immigration numbers down when he was immigration minister. He resigned on the fact that Rishi Sunak wasn't listening to him. So some would argue, Gary, slightly unfair. Nige, you say Ben not liking a US resident disliking Donald Trump. I think I'm right-wing, and I don't like Donald Trump. I also don't like Harris or Biden. Who do you like then, Nige? Let me know. You say the US have less of a chance than we do of getting someone in power you approve of. And what else? So right, you say the left would love you to believe it's a non-story. That's talking about the US diplomatic row about Labour activists going over to the US. Keep those comments coming in. gbnews.com/yoursay. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, covering for Martin Daubney. Back in just a tick.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into this afternoon, there's going to be plenty of dry and bright weather around, plenty of hazy, sunny spells. Still fairly windy in the northwest of Scotland though, shown quite clearly here with the squeeze and the isobars across the bigger picture. But generally we do have high pressure building across much of the country, and that means a mix of cloud and clear spells for much of England and Wales. Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, and fairly cloudy across Scotland too, with blustery winds, a risk of gales by the time we reach the morning, and just some rain starting to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Otherwise, elsewhere, largely dry under those clear spells, feeling a little bit chilly, not quite as chilly as it was last night though. Through into tomorrow morning then, we'll still see plenty of cloud across Scotland, still with those blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts of the northwest, and we will continue to see that rain just start to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start, similar across the north of England, a fair amount of cloud, and then a mix of cloud and clear spells. Most of the clear spells across East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent too. And that generally sets us up for the rest of the day. There will be some cloudy spells at times, the best of the sunshine across East Anglia, Sussex and Kent, and we will continue to see those strong winds in western areas, particularly the northwest of Scotland once again, where there is the risk of those coastal gales, and that rain once again slowly pushing into the far west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So some Outbreaks of rain in the west, but otherwise largely dry, and with highs of around 17, 18, feeling rather pleasant for the time of year. Into the evening, that rain will continue to push its way eastwards across the country, and then it will move erratically across much of England and Wales as we head into Friday, leading us into a fairly unsettled weekend with some rain and showers. Otherwise, that's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in West Yorkshire. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 22 Rishworth Moor heading towards 23 for Huddersfield. Queues going back towards 21 Milne Road. Very slow on the opposite carriageway as traffic slows to look at the accident. We're seeing slow traffic for the M61 southbound in Manchester at junction 1, the Swinton interchange. Queues on the M6 southbound in Cheshire. Firstly, it's partially blocked due to an accident between junction 21 Woolston heading towards junction 20, the Lim interchange. We've also got a lane closed for a broken down vehicle on the M6 southbound between junction 17 Sandbach and 16 for Crewe, and slow on the M1 southbound in Northamptonshire due to an earlier accident in the roadworks between junction 17, the M45 and 16 for Daventry.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon, only on GB News. Dick Dastardly on gbnews.com/yoursay. You said, Ben, I'm unhappy you didn't ask my question. You've let me down, to Robert Jenrick. Sorry, Dick, what was the question? Apologies. Hopefully next time Robert's on, we can get the question to him. Elsewhere, Nanny, you say, Ben, I don't think anyone really cares about the Conservative leader, to be honest. Not on here anyway. Bring on Nigel. I mean, Nanny, you say that, but, you know, they do have dozens and dozens of MPs. What is it, 120-something? They are the official opposition. Compared to Reform's current 5, they are your best bet of getting a right-of-centre party back into power. Some would argue they're not right-of-centre. They're infiltrated by the so-called Wets, but there we go. And Robert, you say, I really like Robert Jenrick's policy proposals, but I suspect too many so-called Conservative MPs in his party will vote against him. And Derek, you say, we'll never be able to leave the ECHR if Parliament's allowed to vote on it. Yeah, interesting. We did ask Robert Jenrick then the mechanics of leaving the ECHR. Would you need to go to Parliament? He said, no, we don't need to. We can leave without a parliamentary vote. However, he did stress that it's probably the right thing to do. Right, we move on. The Home Secretary has revived a review into firearms officer accountability. That's following the acquittal of police marksman Martin Blake for the killing of Chris Cabba. She said the current system for holding police officers to account isn't commanding the confidence of either the public or the police. And she announced the introduction of anonymity for officers subject to criminal trial. Let's get the thoughts now of former Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville. Good afternoon, Mike. Thanks for joining me. Is this good news for firearms officers across the land?
I think it is, absolutely. I mean, in March, when Mr Justice Lucraft took away the anonymity from Sergeant Blake, he said there was no credible, threat to his life, no imminent threat to his life or that of his family. And that's obviously rubbish. And the facts are, what gets me now is what consequences will that judge face? Because I suggest that Sergeant Blake and his family will live in fear for a long time while this £10,000 bounty has been put on their lives. So I think this will give more confidence to police firearms officers. But the fact that Sergeant Blake faced a murder charge in the first place, when we've all seen the evidence now, seems absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully the review will go much further and look at why officers are being charged with these type of offences. I mean, we had another ridiculous situation a few years ago where an officer was driving at high speed to where an Islamist terrorist was stabbing people also in Streatham, and they were charged with dangerous driving. So all these things are just, I think the public look at this and see that the establishment are completely at variance to their opinion.
Mike, I know the answer to this, but there are a few people, my wife included, I have to say, I'm sorry to my wife, but she was asking the question, why can't firearms officers just aim at, say, the kneecaps or the legs? Why do they shoot, in the case of Chris Cabba, at the head? Why can't they just incapacitate instead of killing?
Well, they don't usually shoot at the head. I would suggest that is because, he was drawing backwards or the vehicle was possibly moving forwards. They tend to shoot at the chest area because these people are not some rodeo, they're not a rodeo show where you can shoot the gun out of somebody's hand like Clint Eastwood or something. You have to shoot people to stop them moving. And the only way to do that, to guarantee that, the biggest area is to shoot them in the chest. As I say, they're not some kind of showground act. It isn't like that. They're trained to stop somebody moving.
Yeah, and it was described in court as 17 seconds of chaos. Indeed, when it's not like the movies, some people say. Others were suggesting, why can't you just shoot his tyres to stop the car from getting away? It's not like the movies. They make a life or death split decision. In terms of the pending review from the Home Secretary, continuing what the Tories started, lifelong anonymity until conviction. If you're not convicted, then your name's not going to be released. What are some of the other highlights you think we can expect from it?
Well, I think they're looking into things like the coroner's inquest, where at the moment it can be pronounced as an unlawful killing on the balance of probabilities. That's like a civil case where it's 51 against 49%. And what they're looking at, that's such a serious finding that it should really be a criminal trial where it's beyond reasonable doubt. And I think that's absolutely the correct way, because once that unlawful killing verdict is reached, then people assume that the police officers have committed some form of murder. But I just think they should also look at further than just firearms officers. As I've said, if any officer was engaged, like the officer who was driving towards Streatham High Road, was involved in trying to stop a terrorist attack, then the same kind of threat could be made on them. So I think it should be wider than just that firearms officers.
All right, Mike Neville, thanks very much. And, of course, the officer involved in that case, Martin Blake, he does now face an IOPC gross misconduct hearing as well. So he's been cleared in court of murder, 2 years of hell going through that. He may still lose his job. You couldn't make it up. Coming up, the Defence Secretary has approved plans for German planes to operate from a British base under what the government is calling a landmark defence agreement. Who would have thought 80 years ago this would be happening now? More on this next on GB News. I'm Ben Leo, back in a tick.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Young adults spend a few years living away from home at university, those who go to university, but many then have no choice but to move back in with their parents because of the rising cost of renting.
But is this an excuse, and are Gen Z or Z just being lazy?
No, I mean, what do you make of it, Debbie? Because we do have to have some sympathy, don't we, in that, rents are very high, it's very hard to get a mortgage. There are issues there.
I think the push towards young people to go to university as well is not necessarily the right thing for a lot of people. And I think people should start work early. These guys leave their universities with a huge amount of debt, no jobs, or huge rent. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I think we've got to look at the work ethic and start it younger. Because I think it's so easy just to move back with your mum and dad, isn't it?
To speak like a Gen Zer, they would say that, well, it's OK for your generation, you had it easy.
Realistically, that isn't quite that true, because a lot of people then didn't go to university. This is a relatively new thing that everybody goes to university.
I have to say, what strikes me today is that you still have, amongst all these problems, not having enough money, going to university when perhaps you shouldn't be, all these sort of issues, you still get all these people saying, well, I'm going to have a year out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think the thing is, they say, oh, it was easy for you, but it wasn't really. We still had to rent places.
But the thing is with this debate, Debbie, is the generation we're talking about, Gen Z, who we're accusing of being lazy, have been raised by our generation.
Yeah.
So what have we done wrong that, if they are lazier, has made them like that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon, only on GB News. Now, the Defence Secretary has approved plans for German planes to operate from a British base under what the government is calling a landmark defence agreement. Britain and Germany will work together to develop drones and long-range missiles, whilst a German company will manufacture gun parts in the UK, supporting 400 jobs whilst they're at it. We're joined now by security specialist Dr. Hans Jakob Schindler. Hans, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. I said before the break, sorry to be quite blunt with this, but who would have imagined this 80-odd years ago?
Well, yes, but I mean, it is the expression of a completely new threat environment compared to 5 or even 10 years ago. Russia is no longer engineering some type of insurgency takeover of parts of countries as it did in Georgia in 2008 or even first time round in Ukraine in 2014. It's now a full-fledged land war against Ukraine with thrown-in threats against NATO territory or the use of tactical nuclear weapons, depending on what sentiment strikes the Russian politicians at any given day. So there needs to be greater reorientation away from an emphasis of international stability operations or counterterrorism operations that European armies had really focused on since 9/11 towards more classical defense of NATO territory, which means more defense spending, but also greater interoperability, making sure that both on the technical side, ideally artillery shells of one caliber fit in as many artillery pieces that European nations produce than possible, but also in interoperability in the command and control structure, i.e. doing things together, and hence flying out of Scotland.
Yes, and I'm not sure if you know about this one, but the submarine hunters, as you just mentioned, they're due to be based in Britain for the first time. So submarine hunting planes will be flying from RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Well, it's a landmark deal, isn't it? The Trinity House Agreement. And why is it so important? Why is it so landmark?
Well, I mean, it's no news to you and your listeners and viewers. You left the European Union. So we need special treaties with the UK to do the things that we would usually have done within the framework of the EU. So that's why it is landmark. It's also landmark because I think this is really the first time where you have several things that we do together. We produce arms together, but we also operate together, which is a new cooperation. But it really is the expression of a wider attempt of quite a few European nations to really come together, to pool resources, to get more effective in ramping up our defenses against Russia.
Hans, earlier this year, the head of the army, General Sir Rowley Walker, said that Russia will seek revenge on what's happened in Ukraine and the assistance that the West has provided Vladimir Zelensky. What do you think revenge looks like?
Well, unfortunately, this is going to get a very long, drawn-out conflict. With invading Ukraine, Russia in 2022 really broke the one ironclad rule is that you're no longer taking over countries that are weaker than you just because you're stronger. This is not going to stop with Ukraine. If we can't stop them taking territory in Ukraine, immediately Poland will be the next on the chopping blocks. The Baltic states will be the next on the chopping blocks. It will not stop. But even if we succeed, or the Ukrainians, with our help, succeed in stopping Russia, that doesn't stop the ambitions of Russia to try again and again and again. So we need to be prepared for the long run. And unfortunately, in the last 20 years, and this is true for the UK, but this is also true particularly for Germany, we've gone away from land armies that are capable of fighting large-scale, long-term land wars to very agile, very mobile international forces that we can use in Afghanistan or Africa or the Middle East to fight terrorist organizations. That's a completely different way.
OK, got it. Dr. Hans Jakob Schindler, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Appreciate it. Let's update you on a story that hit the headlines earlier this year. This is shocking CCTV footage of former British soldier Daniel Khalif allegedly making his escape from Wandsworth prison. It's been released, this footage, as part of the prosecution's evidence at his trial today. GB News national reporter Charlie Peters has more on this. Charlie, I remember this quite distinctly, and we've now got footage of it.
That's right, Ben. We can show you footage for the first time on this channel of Daniel Khalif allegedly escaping from Wandsworth prison. Now, the Royal Signal soldier, the 23-year-old, he's accused of spending 2 years of collecting secrets while serving in the army and passing them to Iranian agents. He denies that. The footage we're showing you now is him inside Wandsworth, where he worked for the kitchens. We've now got some footage of him allegedly exiting the prison, where it's said that he created a tie from knotted bed sheets to cling on the underside of a truck, a Bid Foods van. That's what the prosecution says. This is now footage showing Daniel Khalif inside Mountain Warehouse, the store in Richmond, where he was said to be purchasing clothes following his escape. You see him wearing a mask and moving around that location. Now we have him walking down Whitaker Avenue in Richmond. This is on the day after the alleged escape on the 5th of September. Now moving on the towpath towards Richmond Bridge. This is just a few miles away from HMP Wandsworth, where Daniel Khalif is alleged to have made that escape. That's near several pubs, and being in the end of the summer, it would have been extremely busy. And we now have this clip of Daniel Khalif inside Marks & Spencer's Kew Retail Park. This is the footage that the prosecution are putting forward at Woolwich Crown Court. And finally, they say that he purchased a newspaper with his face on it at this newsagent's in Chiswick, where we had that footage of Daniel Khalif. Now, he denies these claims, but the trial is ongoing. OK, Charlie, we'll get you back in the next hour for more on this. That's fascinating footage from the trial today. Stick with us. We're going to come back to you in just a tick. More on that terror attack in Turkey as well in just a minute. For now, here's your weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into this afternoon, there's going to be plenty of dry and bright weather around, plenty of hazy, sunny spells. Still fairly windy in the northwest of Scotland though, shown quite clearly here with the squeeze in the isobars across the bigger picture. But generally we do have high pressure building across much of the country, and that means a mix of cloud and clear spells for much of England and Wales. Northern Ireland fairly cloudy across Scotland too, with blustery winds, a risk of gales by the time we reach the morning, and just some rain starting to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Otherwise, elsewhere, largely dry under those clear spells, feeling a little bit chilly, not quite as chilly as it was last night though. Through into tomorrow morning, then we'll still see plenty of cloud across Scotland, still with those blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts of the northwest. And we will continue to see that rain just start to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start, similar across the north of England, a fair amount of cloud, and then a mix of cloud and clear spells. Most of the clear spells across East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent too. And that generally sets us up for the rest of the day. There will be some cloudy spells at times, the best of the sunshine across East Anglia, Sussex and Kent, and we will continue to see those strong winds in western areas, particularly the northwest of Scotland once again, where there is the risk of those coastal gales, and that rain once again slowly pushing into the far west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So some outbreaks of rain in the west, but otherwise largely dry, and with highs of around 17, 18, feeling rather pleasant for the time of year. Into the evening, that rain will continue to push its way eastwards across the country, and then it will move erratically across much of England and Wales as we head into Friday, leading us into a fairly unsettled weekend with some rain and showers. Otherwise, that's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
Ooh, a chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed Heat Pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Stop-start for the M90 northbound in Perth and Kinross at Junction 12, the Broxton roundabout. Severe delays on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Eastbound, there's 2 lanes closed for an overturned car towing a trailer. Also an accident. That's between Junction 22 Rishworth and 23 Huddersfield. It's also very slow on the opposite carriageway as traffic slows to have a look at that incident. We're seeing the usual slow traffic in the West Midlands to the M5 northbound to join the M6 at Junction 8. In Surrey, the M25 clockwise partially blocked due to an obstruction in the road at Junction 10, the Wisley interchange in the roadworks area. And queues in Hampshire, the A31 westbound in Stony Cross has a lane closed for emergency resurfacing repairs between Stony Cross and the Picket Post services. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Make sure you don't miss out. Get your entry in now. Just one entry could make you the winner. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Ben Leo, bringing you all the latest on the big stories of the day until 6 p.m. We'll be getting you the latest on the deadly terror attack that has killed multiple people at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company in Turkey. More on that as it comes. And elsewhere, Donald Trump is launching legal action against Keir Starmer's party after Labour staffers and one MP, let's not forget, campaigned for Democratic candidate Kamala Harris in key battleground states, including Pennsylvania. Just how bad could this be for UK-US relations if President Trump does indeed win the election in just a couple of weeks? And back over this side of the pond, the Home Secretary has announced that police firearms officers facing prosecution will be entitled to anonymity up to the point of conviction. It comes, of course, after Met Firearms cop Martin Blake was this week accused of murdering Chris Cabba. He was cleared of that charge, of course. We'll have all the latest. And after Sir Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner all handed civil service jobs to donors, activists and pals, Wes Streeting, it's now been revealed, has handed a 6-figure salary job in Labour HQ for his fiancée. We'll have all the latest on Labour's Jobs for Mates scandal coming in just a tick. And a very big, as far as I'm concerned, story breaking in the last hour or so. Apparently, Tony Blair, the Tony Blair Institute for Change, is urging Chancellor Rachel Reeves to introduce a pay-per-mile tax rate on motorists. It would earn the Treasury around £10 billion a year. He reckons cars and vans should pay 1p per mile for every mile they drive, and heavy goods vehicles charge between 2.5 pence and 4 pence per mile. The former Prime Minister, the Labour man, says the move is urgent because drivers are moving to electric cars, ditching petrol and diesel. I don't think that's quite true, which currently hands the government almost £30 billion of tax per year. What do you reckon? Pay per mile. We've heard it before. Very, very controversial indeed. And now Tony Blair, he's back on the scene. He's here. He's urging Rachel Reeves to introduce it in the budget next week. Let me know your thoughts on that. gbnews.com/your say. Big last hour coming up. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. First to Turkey, where multiple people have been killed in a terror attack at the headquarters of an aerospace company. Local media is reporting loud explosions and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire at the site in the Turkish capital of Ankara. It's understood at this point that 4 people are known to have been killed and 14 injured, some in a critical condition. It is not yet clear who is behind the attack. Back in the UK, an investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage, where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. Operations have now returned to normal at Birmingham Airport after an evacuation, and all flights were suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle. In a post on social media, the airport advised travellers to check their latest flight information and apologised for any inconvenience and disruption, saying the safety and security of everyone at the airport was our #1 priority. Turning to the House of Commons, where Angela Rayner's been filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions. The Deputy Prime Minister came under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs. It's after the deadly sinking of a migrant boat in the English Channel this morning. In response, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Meanwhile, Yvette Cooper has announced that firearms officers facing trial over shooting suspects will receive anonymity up to the point of conviction. The Home Secretary's common statement follows the jury's decision to clear police marksman Martin Blake of the murder of Chris Cabba, who was unarmed when shot. The Met Police Commissioner has described the current accountability system as broken, raising concerns about morale among firearms officers. Further details on the review are expected from the Home Secretary tomorrow.
Government has made it a mission to put confidence back into policing. So as part of that work, I want to update the House on new measures that we will take forward in response to the accountability review and following ongoing work to respond to issues raised by the previous Angelini and Casey reviews. A package of reforms to rebuild confidence for police officers and for communities, to tackle the unacceptable delays and confusion in the system, ensuring the complexity of specialist operations is considered at an early stage, and ensuring that the highest standards are upheld and maintained.
Gisèle Pellicotte, the French woman at the centre of a landmark trial of 50 men who were accused of raping her, has taken to the stand, sending a powerful message to survivors of sexual violence. After being drugged and assaulted by her then-husband, she is standing against the men accused of her abuse. In her testimony, the 72-year-old urged other victims to shed their shame, saying it's not for us to have shame, it's for them. With an open trial and the showing of evidence, Gisèle hopes to inspire other survivors. And Sir Keir Starmer insists his relationship with Donald Trump is intact despite claims Labour interfered in the US election. Trump's campaign filed a complaint accusing Labour of illegally supporting Kamala Harris, citing meetings between senior Labour officials and her team. Starmer dismissed the claims, stating Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. He emphasised his personal rapport with Trump, recalling their meeting in New York, and said he'll work with whoever becomes the next US president. The complaint remains under review by US federal election officials. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia. Let's turn our attentions to Turkey now, where casualties have been confirmed in the capital of Ankara as the government says it is responding to a terrorist attack today. For more on this, let's speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, we can bring you live images from the scene of this attack, which is at the TUSAS aerospace company just to the north of Ankara, a very important company as far as the military-industrial complex in Turkey is concerned. They are responsible for manufacturing the engine and other components of Turkey's fifth-generation fighter jets, as well as being involved in other drone technology and alike. So the latest information we've got is that the death toll has risen. 4 people have been killed and 14 others injured. 3 of those, we're told, are in a critical condition. Now, as the attack unfolded a little earlier, gunshots rang out as well as explosions. We can let you see now just the moments when that attack was unfolding. So quite a powerful blast that rang out. There are some indications, or reports at least, that that was a suicide bomber. But then, as you can see from hopefully some other footage we can play you, there are 2 attackers with long-barreled rifles, automatic rifles, that by this yellow taxi. To begin with, there's at least 1 person lying on the ground having been shot, and then the 2 attackers move into the main building itself through the security turnstiles there to get into the building. Now, according to the Turkish authorities, 2 terrorists have been, in their terms, neutralised, so we believe have been killed. No reports that they are confirming of a suicide bomb, but certainly explosions, and we could see it was quite a powerful blast. That is, we believe, one of the attackers. There's a male, and we believe there was a female attacker as well. So that one of the attackers, well armed, with a long-barreled weapon. There are other reports that we've seen circulating now in Turkish media that shows an array of explosive devices, grenades, weapons, ammunition and alike that were in belts that we believe were being carried by these 2 attackers. So the attack as such, we think, is over. But as I say, there's nothing really that's coming in the way of confirmation from the Turkish government to say that. They are just confirming that the death toll has risen to 4, with 14 injured, 3 of those critically injured. But you can see, of course, from the live shots there, still a very significant emergency service presence with this huge queue of ambulances just waiting outside the aerospace headquarters there north of Ankara.
Turkey, unfortunately, has had its fair share of terrorist attacks before from the likes of Islamic State, the Kurdish PKK and indeed far-left extremists. Any idea at this early stage, Mark, who may be responsible?
Well, the Turkish government are not saying who could be responsible, but any one of the above, you're right, there is a long and sad history of terrorism in Turkey. They've been particularly badly hit over the years by the PKK, this militant group attached to efforts for more autonomy or a Turkey or a Kurdish homeland, and they have in particular targeted policing and military complexes in the past, as well as civilian infrastructure too. And then there's the Islamist problem, which is long-standing in Turkey. Al-Qaeda in the past, then ISIS. You know, either of the above could potentially be in the line of, you know, who might be responsible. And then there's this very significant issue with leftist terrorism in the country as well.
Yeah, indeed. OK, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, thank you very much. Just reading here as well, Turkey's defence sector, apparently, which is known widely for its Bayraktar drones, accounts for nearly 80% of the country's export revenues. So it relies heavily on defence. And, of course, the attack today was at an aerospace and defence headquarters where, I have to say, apparently 15,000 people work there. Of course, any death is a tragedy, but if the death toll stands at its current number of 4, you know, you'd have to say, in comparison to how many people work there, you'd have to say that it was, not very vast, shall we say. I have to be careful with my language. Right, more on that as the show progresses. Mark White will be sticking around. Elsewhere across the pond, Donald Trump's campaign team has made a formal legal complaint against the UK Labour Party over what they call blatant foreign interference in the US election, which is set to take place in less than 2 weeks. So Trump's complaints mainly focus on Labour volunteers and staffers who have arrived in the US to campaign for his rival, the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, in critical battleground states, including Pennsylvania. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer today dismissed claims of interference and insisted Labour members were in the US voluntarily, as they have done in previous election cycles. I'm joined now by Chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Greg, good evening. Thank you for joining me. I speak to Labour types about this, and even Sir Keir Starmer today has says nothing to see here because it's happened in years past. But I guess the difference is, Greg, they're in power now. This is the party of government.
Yeah, it's the party of government. And look, there might be some election violations. You know, Federal Election Commission is looking at it. There might be. I'm not sure that it'll turn out that way. But it's just bad optics. It's bad timing for sure. They are the party in power right now. But also, you know, it's 2 weeks before the election. You know, this comes after attempts by both Keir Starmer and David Lammy in the summer to kiss and make up and reach out to President Trump. You know, David Lammy's past comments were really obnoxious, really offensive. And so, you know, this might be a bit of a speed bump in that process.
You are familiar with Trump and his team. I know you've met his sons a couple of times. You're fairly close to them. He's not a man, Donald Trump, to forgive and forget quite easily, is he? He tends to hold grudges, shall we say?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, in many cases, he does hold a grudge. He takes things personally, and he really makes decisions based on personal relationships. And he does carry these grievances with him. So I think there's a risk there. And obviously, the party, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, David Lammy, they should have known that. And now hopefully he doesn't carry the grudge here, and hopefully he just gets over it and this thing blows over, which I think there's a good chance it will. But it's surely not good timing, and it will probably backfire on the Democrats anyway. You saw what happened with the Guardian pen pal campaign back in 2004, trying to reach out to voters in Ohio. It totally backfired. It's one of the reasons George W. Bush won the election in 2004.
Yeah, and arguably, Greg, you could say one of the main factors behind the Brexit vote was Barack Obama coming over here with David Cameron, getting up on that lectern and threatening Brits, saying, if you vote leave, you're going to be back of the queue for a trade deal. That was a pivotal moment, so we don't like it either.
No, that's right. And, you know, he thought he was cute by using the word Q, which we don't use in America. But, you know, look, Ben, and this comes also with, you know, sort of odd timing, you know, with this news about the CCDH. You know, trying to put the squeeze on Elon Musk and Twitter. You know, that's basically censorship. And there's some real sensitivities in the U.S., especially with Republicans, about censorship after what happened, you know, not only with the collusion on the Russia collusion hoax, but also, you know, censoring the Hunter Biden laptop, censoring any information about COVID and lockdowns and masks, vaxes, you know. Anything that you know kind of reeks of censorship will be looked upon, you know, very unfavorably by the Republicans in the U.S. right now.
OK, one-word answer, please, Greg. The big election is in 2 weeks. I'm here for it. I can't wait. Who wins?
Trump will win. It's all the momentum is with Trump right now.
OK, Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. All right, back this side of the pond, the Home Secretary has revived a review into firearms officer accountability. That follows the acquittal of police marksman Martin Blake yesterday for the killing of Chris Cabba. She said the current system for holding police officers to account is not commanding the confidence of either the public or the police, and she announced the introduction of anonymity for officers subject to criminal trial.
When officers act in the most dangerous situations on behalf of the state, it is vital that those officers and their families are not put in further danger during any subsequent legal proceedings. So we will therefore introduce a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial following a police shooting in the course of their professional duties up to the point of conviction.
Well, let's get the thoughts now of a man who's been there and done that. He's former Arms Response Sergeant Harry Tanguy. Harry, thank you for joining me. First of all, can I get your reaction, please, to the decision yesterday to acquit Martin Blake of Chris Cabba's murder?
Well, Britain's a lot safer now because I know there was going to be a hell of a lot of armed officers just leaving. In fact, there was quite a number that you won't know about, but I am very well aware had already put their weapons down, waiting for the result of this court case.
Wow.
And it's not quite so easy to just restart again. So they would have had, because to keep training up and keep it to the level that it should be, that can take months. So, yeah, we can sleep a lot safer in our beds now than we could have done otherwise. It's absolutely the right decision. It shouldn't have got there in the first place.
So, Harry, sorry, just to clarify, you're saying that armed officers who were currently in forces across the UK, they, what, resigned?
They came off because you can't force someone to stay on armed response, OK, because we don't want people being forced. So they would go to frontline traffic duties or any other thing, any other department that they were qualified to do. And they were waiting. I spoke to the officer who said there were several in 3 forces that he knew. There were 10 in his force that had down tools until the result of this this criminal case.
Wow, astonishing. OK. What about this review now from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper? She's promising, or suggesting at least, that the review could end up with anonymity for firearms cops who pull the trigger up until the point of conviction. I mean, the question begs, why wasn't Martin Blake given that over the last 2 years?
Well, exactly. And why were his co-offenders for the previous, you've seen the nightclub shooting, why were his co-offenders given anonymity until conviction? It seems to be voyeurism. And if you're a police officer, you are in the public eye, and the press take great interest because it's very relevant to the ordinary man and woman in the street, isn't it? As opposed to a civilian having a domestic shooting where someone is tragically killed. So it means then that everyone knows who that police officer is. His kids will get bullied, saying, "Your dad." I've listened to these previous police officers who've been involved in shooting. Their kids are told and bullied in their playground, saying, "Your dad's a murderer," etc.
Wow.
Besides the point of it being extremely dangerous to know that some of the most violent, dangerous people and armed gangs are aware who you are and therefore probably where you live.
Such a good point, Harry. We forget about the facts. I said yesterday, we forget about the facts that this firearms officer, Martin Blake, had to pull the trigger and take another man's life. He has to deal with that. Then he had to deal with the court case, being accused of murder, and something I never thought of, his name being public. Not only does he have, or did he have, a 10 grand bounty on his head by some of these rotten, thuggish criminal gangs in London who want reprisals, but his kids, as you just mentioned, his name is public. He's got family, he's got children. Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott and Black Lives Matter have this evening been asked to apologise for backing Chris Cabba in the wake of his death a couple of years ago. We know the full truth now. We know Chris Cabba's full past. Should they apologise, people like Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn?
Oh, gosh, does anyone listen to them anymore? I mean, if there's a police officer there, they're just firing at them non-stop. They don't care whether they're right or wrong, what the justice was. They just want to look good and get more votes, quite frankly. It's disgusting. What does no one ask BLM where the 80 million quid has gone? I mean, why are we still listening to these people? Yeah, it's ridiculous. And should they apologise? Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah. Harry, I'll tell you where some of the money went in the US anyway. It went on vast property portfolios. $6 million. Exactly. Patrice Colors, who's the former chief exec of BLM USA. Anyway, Harry, Tanguy, thank you very much for being with me this afternoon.
Pleasure.
OK, plenty more coming up in the show, including Are Labour the party of cronyism? That's next. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil. Morning, Ben. And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So that's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
colour. See if we get a close-up.
So, yeah, so pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The two diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really. Yeah. 85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. And yeah, I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be amazing. So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So.
It fits
depends
like
where you're buying it from.
It fits like a glove, Neil. Maybe it's a sign. It's meant to be mine.
Definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon, only on GB News. Just a very quick point. Phil Carr, you have said on your say, Ben, you are so wrong calling it murder. He's been cleared. Yes, indeed. It was a murder trial, though. It doesn't change the fact it was a murder trial. Just thought I'd kindly respond to you on that point. Now, the shocking CCTV footage of former British soldier Daniel Khalif allegedly making his escape from Wandsworth Prison has been released as part of the prosecution's evidence at his trial today. Mr Khalif is currently on trial for multiple charges, which include perpetrating a bomb hoax and passing information to a foreign power. That's in addition to escaping from prison last year, allegedly. The 23-year-old has denied all the charges against him. Charlie Peters, our national reporter, has been following this closely. Charlie, what's the latest?
Well, Ben, the 23-year-old former member of the Royal Signals, as you said, has denied all of those charges. But throughout this ongoing trial at Woolwich Crown Court, we now have footage that we can show you of that incident. I can play it for you now. The first shot that the court has been shown was Daniel Khalif working inside the prison. There he is inside the area where he was working, which was in the kitchens inside HMP Wandsworth. And then there is footage now of the bid food truck van leaving HMP Wandsworth. Now, it's said, according to the prosecution, that Daniel Khalif was underneath that van, having made a sling of knotted bed sheets to cling on the underside while working on kitchen duty on the 6th of September last year. Now, the next shot here is Daniel Khalif inside the Mountain Warehouse store in Richmond, where the prosecution says he was there picking up clothing items, of course, wanting to change out of the prison standard kit he was in. Then in Whitaker Avenue in Richmond, also on the same day of this alleged escape, now in the later into the evening, approaching 6 p.m, and walking on the towpath towards Richmond Bridge, also still walking, following the same day of that alleged escape, the dramatic escape under that food truck. Now, next, we also saw footage of Daniel Khalif, that former soldier, inside Marks and Spencer's at the retail park in Richmond, picking up some items, now wearing a cap. And finally, we have a clip we can show you now of Daniel Khalif allegedly inside a newsagent's, where he was seen looking at a newspaper article the next day with his face on it, a front page cover of the story about his alleged escape. Now, Woolwich Crown Court has also seen further footage of that day, and the Category B prison in southwest London has also got several other shots of the Sprinter van on the outside, showing that bid food truck arriving and leaving, allegedly leaving, with Daniel Khalif underneath. So the counter-terrorism authorities who were working on this investigation, they were working from a news site in West Brompton. They say it was the first time that the multi-agency operations came together and were used in anger. This is, they say, their first success in tracking down a wanted suspect who was being held on terror charges. Now, Daniel Khalif was inside HMP Wandsworth due to being held on remand for those charges, accused of passing secrets to Iranian handlers over a 2-year period, information that they said was harmful to the state, and also held information on several members of the armed forces. Now, Khalifa was found to be missing from a routine head count later on that day, on September the 6th, sparking that nationwide search. But it was only a few miles away in southwest London that he was eventually found, and these further charges of escaping from a prison could be brought forward. Now, the time when he was said to be collecting and sharing all that sensitive information with Iranian intelligence agents was between May 2019 and January 2022. But Daniel Khalif, the former Royal Signals Regiment soldier, denies all of those charges.
OK, Charlie Peters, thank you very much. Appreciate it, as always. We'll try and get some more of that footage later on in the day. Right, let's move on. Yes, another story involving jobs for the boys. Jobs for the boys when it comes to Labour. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, he's under fire after revealing his fiancée, no less, has been hired by Labour HQ in a role which will earn him £100,000 a year. All right, for some. Joe Dancy's appointment as Exec Director of Policy and Communications has added to concerns that Labour and Downing Street have been hiring too many people with family links to party leaders. Well, let's get the thoughts now of my favourite sparring partner, former Labour spokesman James Mathewson. Good afternoon, James. Thank you for joining me. This is exactly how I described it, isn't it? Jobs for the boys, and it comes weeks or months, I guess, after Labour packs the civil service, which is meant to be politically neutral, with old pals from think tanks and old staffers related to their campaigns. They're no different from the Tories, are they?
I think the question around the civil service element's interesting. I think there is an argument there. I'll give you that, Ben. You know, we don't often concede to each other, but I will give you that there is an argument there about the civil service being neutral. And, you know, we saw with Sue Gray how that ended, her coming across into the political sphere, having been a civil servant. So I think there is an argument there, but I do think it's separate to this latest development, which is trying to be grouped with the others by Labour's political opponents. But it is very different because this individual, Joe Dancy, he's a very, very qualified individual for this role. He's the kind of person you want to have in this position, and all of his CV checks out with regard to leading up to a job like this. In fact, you could argue from his position from owning his own advisory firm is a step down. He's probably taken a pay cut to take on the role.
what, £105,000 a year? I mean, Daubney was also meant to be an MP. He was selected for the Stockton West constituency, despite living in London with Wes Streeting. So he was trying to be parachuted into a seat that he probably had never even been to. I mean, I guess he'd visited there, but he lived in London. He didn't live in that seat. He didn't get the seat. He was ousted by an eventual Tory winner. And then suddenly he's into this comms role on 100k a year. I mean, it stinks, doesn't it? Come on, James.
I mean, the Labour Party will... I mean, if you're in the political parties and you're in your party, it's the same in the Tories, and it was the same with the likes of, if you remember, Boris Johnson's fiancée at the time when she was his fiancée, Carrie, and she was at, Tory headquarters, and then all of a sudden got all these rules that came out of nowhere. Of course, there is loyalty and there is, people question if they can rely on the people around them. So I do think, it's natural in politics for people to appoint their allies and appoint people who support them. I would question whether his connection to Wes Streeting, in the fact that they live together and, they're in a relationship, whether that's the strongest connection here, when actually he was a significant worker for Peter Mandelson. And I mean, it looks like Mandelson has now got, obviously, his influence again in the party restored to where it once was. So I do think, his connections already, you could argue he's even more well connected to that side of the party than Wes Streeting is. So it's no surprise, really. And like you say, these seats where MPs, and I disagree with it, I don't think people should be parachuted into seats. But it happens, and it happens
James,
in all the major
we're just pushed for time, unfortunately. I'm going to see if we can get you back in the next 20 minutes or so, because there's a breaking story about Tony Blair, his institute, who is pressuring Rachel Reeves next week to introduce pay per mile on motorists. He suggests charging motorists of petrol and diesel cars 1p per mile, which some people reckon is a complete outrage. But if you can just hang around, we can maybe discuss that as well. James Mathieson, thank you. Coming up, apparently scurvy is on the return. Some good news. A lack of vitamin C, obesity and relying on ultra-processed foods is heralding the return of scurvy. Good stuff. Let's get your news headlines now with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. It's 5:33. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. To Turkey now, where multiple people have been killed in a terror attack at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company. Local media is reporting a loud explosion and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire at the site in the Turkish capital of Ankara. It's understood at this point 4 people are known to have been killed and 14 injured, some in a critical condition. An image has now emerged of the alleged gunman. Security camera images from the attack, aired on television, showed a man carrying a backpack and holding an assault rifle. Back in the UK, an investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage, where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as the situation develops. Now, operations have returned to normal at Birmingham Airport after an evacuation, and all flights were suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle. In a post on social media, the airport advised travellers to check their latest flight information and apologised for any inconvenience and disruption, saying the safety and security of everyone at the airport was our #1 priority. And Yvette Cooper has announced that firearms officers facing trial over shooting suspects will receive anonymity up to the point of conviction. The Home Secretary's common statement follows the jury's decision to clear police marksman Martin Blake of the murder of Chris Cabba, who was unarmed when shot. The Met Police Commissioner has described the current accountability system as broken, raising concerns about morale among firearms officers. Further details on the review are expected from the Home Secretary tomorrow.
Government has made it a mission to put confidence back into policing. So as part of that work, I want to update the House on new measures that we will take forward in response to the accountability review and following ongoing work to respond to issues raised by the previous Angelini and Casey reviews. A package of reforms to rebuild confidence for police officers and for communities, to tackle the unacceptable delays and confusion in the system, ensuring the complexity of specialist operations is considered at an early stage, and ensuring that the highest standards are upheld and maintained.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2936 and €1.2005. The price of gold is £2,105 and 18 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,258 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK, let's go back to former Labour spokesman James Mathewson, who was very kindly held on the line because I wanted to briefly get your thoughts on Tony Blair. He's back again. He's suggesting or urging Rachel Reeves to introduce a £10 billion tax on motorists by charging them 1p per every mile driven. Why does Tony Blair think anybody cares what he has to say anymore, James?
Because it's Tony Blair, Ben. You'll never get rid of Tony Blair. And his Institute for Government is an absolute powerhouse now. It is very influential. Those of us who now work in the world of political lobbying and influence, anybody knows that the Institute for Government, Tony Blair's Institute for Government, is absolutely a powerhouse. So I do think it's interesting because they have some really good researchers and scientists and economic minds there coming up with proposals. But I also question, because, you know, Tony Blair is aligned with this Labour government and with Keir Starmer's leadership. Yeah. I wonder what the timing of this tells us about the budget that is to come. The idea of a pay-per-mile tax on electric vehicles, which is, as I believe, what it is meant to be, on electric vehicles specifically, isn't a problem really in my mind, because we know we pay fuel duty. Those of us with cars that aren't electric pay fuel duty on a lot of them as it is, and it would levy money straight away. But they need to be careful about the impact on companies like Nissan, you know, who are huge employers in the northeast, and what they think of it.
Well, Blair is suggesting cars and vans should pay 1p per mile and heavy goods vehicles charge between 2.5 pence and 4p per mile. Interesting. The question begs, you can't answer, unfortunately, because we're running out of time, but the question begs, James, is Tony Blair pulling Sir Keir Starmer's strings behind the scenes? We'll catch up next time. Thank you, James Mathewson. Keep your comments coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Very much appreciate you being with me this evening. Lots more to come in the next hour or so, including, as I just mentioned, the return of scurvy. I'll tell you more just after the break.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into this afternoon, there's going to be plenty of dry and bright weather around, plenty of hazy, sunny spells. Still fairly windy in the northwest of Scotland though, shown quite clearly here with the squeeze in the isobars across the bigger picture. But generally we do have high pressure building across much of the country, and that means a mix of cloud and clear spells for much of England and Wales. Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, and fairly cloudy across Scotland too, with blustery winds, a risk of gales by the time we reach the morning, and just some rain starting to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Otherwise, elsewhere, largely dry under those clear spells, feeling a little bit chilly, not quite as chilly as it was last night though. Through into tomorrow morning, then we'll still see plenty of cloud across Scotland, still with those blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts of the northwest, and we will continue to see that rain just start to creep in to the Outer Hebrides. Across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start, similar across the north of England, a fair amount of cloud, and then a mix of cloud and clear spells. Most of the clear spells across East Anglia, parts of Sussex and Kent too, and that generally sets us up for the rest of the day. There will be some cloudy spells at times, the best of the sunshine across East Anglia, Sussex and Kent, and we will continue to see those strong winds in western areas, particularly the northwest of Scotland once again, where there is the risk of those coastal gales, and that rain once again slowly pushing into the far west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So some outbreaks of rain in the west, but otherwise largely dry, and with highs of around 17, 18, feeling rather pleasant for the time of year. Into the evening, that rain will continue to push its way eastwards across the country, and then it will move erratically across much of England and Wales as we head into Friday, leading us into a fairly unsettled weekend with some rain and showers. Otherwise, that's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M74 southbound in South Lanarkshire is partially blocked for an accident between junction 11 Ponale and 12 for Millbank. Severe delays on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Eastbound, there's 2 lanes closed for an overturned car towing a trailer. Also an accident, that's between junction 22 Rishworth Moor heading towards junction 23 Huddersfield. It's also very slow on the opposite carriageway due to traffic slowing. To look at that incident, the usual slow traffic in the West Midlands for the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues on the M25 anti-clockwise in Surrey. There's a lane closed for emergency pothole repairs from junction 9 Leatherhead towards junction 8 Reigate. And also in Surrey, it's slow for the A3 northbound in Wisley just before the Wisley interchange. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think. So every day we'll be running our poll of the day. And today we've been asking, with the King and Queen in Samoa for the Commonwealth Head of Government meeting, is the Commonwealth still relevant? Well, the final results are now in. 72% of you said yes, the Commonwealth is still relevant in today's modern age. 26% of you said no. 2% of you said, well, you're not quite sure. I think it's a great idea. I'm with you, 72%. The Commonwealth, why not? International friendship, international unity, and we've got a bit of British history and tradition still making its way across the globe. For all of our latest polls and info on how to vote in the future, just go to gbnews.com/poll. Right, we swiftly move on. It's been revealed that public sector workers are to be spared from the Chancellor's move to increase national insurance contributions on employers' contributions to retirement funds in the budget being announced next Wednesday. That is despite complaints that it would be a straightforward breach of Labour's manifesto and, therefore, the burden will come entirely from the private sector. So is Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, becoming the Chancellor of inequality? Well, we can get the view now of the pension expert at the Lancat, Tom McPhail. Tom, is Rachel Reeves swiftly becoming the Chancellor of inequality?
Well, she's going to tell us that she's not breaching her manifesto promises. I think a lot of people think a bit differently. There are 2 pension systems here in the UK. There's the public sector pensions and there's the private sector pensions. And once upon a time, they looked pretty similar. And a lot of employers in the private sector sponsored nice, guaranteed, defined benefit pension schemes, final salary pension schemes. Those are almost gone now in the private sector, but they're still there in the public sector. And this latest suggestion, obviously it's not confirmed until the budget, but the suggestion that Rachel Reeves is going to take away the national insurance relief on employers' pension contributions will only exacerbate that difference between public and private sector pension provision. OK, it's going to be apparently a £5 billion whack to the private sector. Who really is going to pay for that? Surely it's working people, the same people that Labour seem to bang on about protecting so much. If employers are forced to pay national insurance on their pension contributions, as appears likely, that will push up the cost of employment. That will inevitably feed through into lower wage settlements in the future, quite likely downward pressure on pension contributions. And so it's galling to see that the reports say today that in the public sector, the Chancellor will compensate public sector employers, such as the Department for Education, so that public sector employers won't have to pay that additional national insurance. So there's a disparity between public and private sector employment, and the gap in their pension provisions will only grow. This is public sector gold-plated pensions protected at any cost, as usual, isn't it, Tom? It certainly feels like that. And I think a particular sector that's going to really feel the pain here is the education sector, where private schools are obviously already under a lot of pressure due to the loss of the imposition of VAT on school fees. And now what we're going to find is that they're going to have to pay that national insurance on their pension contributions, whilst their counterparts against whom they compete in in the public sector won't have to pay that additional cost. So it looks to me like it's going to put more pressure onto private schools. We're going to see them struggling to recruit and retain teachers even more than was already the case as a result of the VAT imposition.
Very good, very good. Nothing surprises me anymore. Tom McPhail, your pension expert at the Landcat, thank you very much for being with me this afternoon. Coming up, I've been mentioning it a couple of times in the last hour, scurvy could be making a comeback as the cost of living crisis has a knock-on effect. Lack of vitamin C, ultra-processed food and people's diets. I'll reveal all in just a tick. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high. If you just turn it down by one simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things, but it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, comebacks have become a huge part of modern life, haven't they? From, I guess, Oasis to Top Gun, everything's been making a return this decade, but concerns now are growing over a less celebrated comeback. Scurvy. That's right, the deficiency disease has seen cases more than double over the last decade, with the cost of living forcing people to compromise on healthier diets. Let's get the thoughts now of former presenter of Fat Families, Steve. Steve, sorry for calling you fat, or as you
calling me a fatty to start with, right?
As you would call people, jelly belly jumbos. Steve, scurvy making a return. This is a serious story. A lack of vitamin C, processed food, ultra-processed meat is being blamed. Should we be worried?
Well, the first thing to say with scurvy, no, we shouldn't be overly worried. That's the first thing. With scurvy, what happened years ago when crews were away at sea a lot, they would get scurvy. And symptoms of scurvy are things like bleeding gums, and you've got spots on the tongue as well, blue spots, red spots. muscle and joint pain. And the answer to sailors on the ships, the doctor found, was to increase the amount of vitamin C. And this doctor suggested giving them lime juice daily, which they did, and it just went away. And that's why sailors now, as I understand it, are often called limeys.
So that makes sense.
Yes, but the answer is this: we need to just make sure we're getting enough vitamin C. So I'm going to give you some of the key things to make sure that you're including for your listeners and viewers.
I'm taking notes.
Oranges is common sense. Lemons, kiwis, carrots, spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, even though they'll give you some wind. But did you know, this really kind of surprised me when I was researching, that stinging nettles have more vitamin C than an orange. So the nettle leaves, which can be used in soup, right, are actually really quite good for us. However, I can hear people now looking at the screen saying, well, it's all right for him. It's very expensive to eat well. Well, I want to help you on that one, viewers and listeners. Making sure you're getting your fruit and veg, buy frozen if money's tight. The nutrients will remain. Okay, that's the first thing to say. The other thing to say is to simply Google buy cheap fruit and veg. Now, I did a shop about today, and I could get 5 oranges for 99p. I could get 5 lemons for 86p. I could get 4 kiwi fruits for £1.50. And I could get 4 limes at, 95p. You get a big chocolate bar and it'll cost you more than that.
I was just going to say, Steve, yeah, but I can get a couple of chocky bars for that and maybe a packet of crisps.
Yes, you can, and that's your choice. And there's nothing wrong with having that occasionally. 80-20, 80% eat well, 20% a bit of what you fancy. But making sure that you keeping your vitamin C up.
Yeah.
And the other thing to say to people, and we all know this, but we don't do it, is shop late in the day, because they're always, cutting the price late in the day as well. Get down the market. You can also get vitamin C vitamins. I've got you can get 60 capsules for £3.49 if you look online as well. So there is always a solution when it comes to affordability for fresh fruit and vegetables and all of your great vitamins, so you don't get scurvy.
All right, Steve, good stuff. Yeah, we don't want to end up the way of the sailors and the pirates. A good tip, by the way, about going to the supermarkets at the end of the day. My mother, bless her, she, back in the day, was a notorious yellow sticker chaser down at Tesco and wherever else. Steve Miller, former presenter of Fat Families, thank you very much for being with me. Appreciate it. Quick message on your say, Penny. You said, oh, Ben, you've just put me off buying a pack of crisps. Penny, go and get that pack of crisps, fill your boots. Somebody in the studio today has even bought their first mince pies of the year. I said it's only October, but we've all been getting stuck into them, so fill your boots. Thank you for being with me this afternoon. Really appreciate your company. Jubes is next, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into this afternoon, there's going to be plenty of dry and bright weather around, plenty of hazy, sunny spells. Still fairly windy in the northwest of Scotland though, shown quite clearly here with the squeeze and the isobars across the bigger picture. But generally we do have high pressure building across much of the country, and that means a mix of cloud and clear spells for much of England and Wales. Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, and fairly cloudy across Scotland too, with blustery winds, a risk